Lord of Mystery, The Arrival of the New Black Emperor. By author Huo Yang. Chapter 1-25. Hobert Jeffrey clearly realized that he had entered a dream again. Not far away, there was a crooked, almost overgrown ancient castle, and a beautiful but abandoned ancient town. Strangely, on the ground in the distance, there were suns, clouds, and stars. In the sky, there was a vast forest, with giant trees hanging upside down like stalactites in a cave. Between the sky and the ground, there were also vertical mountains and a huge clock tower, as if someone had hung these landscapes on a giant wall. Everything before his eyes looked as if this world was in a box. For the past month, Hobert had frequently appeared in this dream, but the dream was so vivid that he remembered everything he saw in it clearly after waking up. There was no one here. No, that's not right, he couldn't say there was no one. Hobert looked back and saw that the blurry figure was indeed not far behind him. Every time Hobert was in the dream, he would encounter this figure. Because he was too blurry, Hobert couldn't make out his appearance, only that he was opening his mouth, seemingly screaming something. Sometimes in the dream, he could hear his screams, and sometimes he couldn't. If he couldn't hear it, then it was truly a blessing, because his screams would make Hobert's entire brain feel as if it were boiling, and at the same time, a surge of overwhelming madness seemed to gush out from within him. Whenever this happened, Hobert would wake up from the dream and have to struggle against the madness within him. Hobert once speculated whether that figure might be a resident here, and he tried to communicate effectively with him, but all attempts at communication failed without exception. Therefore, after seeing the figure, Hobert could only choose to flee quickly. The figure floated faster than Hobert ran and quickly caught up. Hobert smiled bitterly, the other party's roar still pierced his eardrums. The painful sensation of his brain churning appeared again. Just as Hobert was clenching his teeth, preparing to face the moment of waking, he actually understood the other party's scream. Country of disorder! Country of disorder! The other party had been screaming, country of disorder, all along. Memories long sealed deep within Hobert's mind were awakened. Country of disorder was one of the source material. Hobert looked around in astonishment. This is the country of disorder. Shouldn't it be on the west continent? Hiss. Hobert woke up from his dream, sitting up abruptly from the bed. Outside the window, a red moon hung in the night sky, and he could hear the chirping of insects and the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves. This looked like a peaceful night in every way. Gasping for breath, Hobert found himself covered in a cold sweat. Then he realized that he seemed to have lost a very important memory. In his dream, he seemed to have understood where the dream world was, but why couldn't he remember it? This was not the first time he had felt this way. Hobert had transmigrated to this world a month ago. Before transmigrating, he was an ordinary wage slave in Washaw, and in his free time, he enjoyed reading novels. So, after he transmigrated, he quickly discovered that this was the world of Lord of the Mysteries. The kingdom he was in was ruined, the city he was in was the capital Backland, and the current king was George III. Of course, more importantly, Hobert discovered after transmigrating that he had some beander characteristics. For example, his eloquence seemed to have improved greatly, and his family and friends became easier to persuade. But strangely, Hobert had inherited almost all the memories from the original owner, yet the original owner had never consumed a mystical potion, nor had he come into contact with any items with obvious extraordinary characteristics. Since Hobert transmigrated, he would have a dream with that strange scene every 2 or 3 days. Now, he had such a dream almost every day. This matter had always troubled Hobert. He truly couldn't understand where the extraordinary characteristics that suddenly appeared on him came from. This was the first strange thing after transmigrating. The second strange thing was Hobert's memory loss. He had read Lord of the Mysteries several times and was very familiar with the plots of the first few volumes, but he only had a vague concept of the plots of the later volumes. Hobert could roughly realize that these memory losses were a form of self-protection. He also vaguely remembered that if his sequence was too low, simply knowing some mysticism knowledge would lead to contamination. However, what he couldn't understand was why he would lose these memories. These thoughts of Hobert after waking from the dream were only for an instant. Then, a severe headache swept over him, as if someone was stirring his brain with a knife. At the same time, Hobert felt a monstrous beast of madness within him, about to tear open his body and rush out. This time, the feeling of madness was more severe than any before. Hobert fell to the ground, trembling all over, wanting to scream wildly, wanting to smash everything in the room, wanting to kill everyone in the house. His remaining sanity stopped Hobert's insane thoughts. He struggled to suppress the pain and madness, and using the Hermes he had learned from the grammar school, he tried to make his pronunciation as clear as possible. The fool who does not belong to this era. You are the mysterious ruler above the gray fog. You are the king of yellow and black who controls good luck. I implore your help. I implore your favor. I implore you to help me suppress the endless madness. This was the only solution Hobert could think of. Although he guessed that his adoptive father was a beander, the other party had never shown any beander abilities, nor had he revealed any knowledge about mysticism. Therefore, Hobert did not dare to expose his condition. Compared to his adoptive father, Hobert was more willing to trust Klein, who was also a transmigrator. At least he knew that this, the fool, was compassionate and kind-hearted. The current date was early July 1349. Hobert vaguely remembered that Klein should have already transmigrated by this time and had already started the tarot club on, he forgot where, but it was on a mysterious gray fog. This was not the first time he had chanted the honorific name of the Fool. Before, he had never received a response. Theoretically, Kay should have already investigated him. He hoped this time would attract Klein's attention. If this continued, he felt he would truly go insane. Hobert chanted the honorific name of the Fool 7 or 8 times. His sanity gradually failed to suppress the madness in his heart. Just as the madness on his body was about to completely lose control, he suddenly felt as if he was being pulled by something, passing through a layer of grayish-white mist, and arriving in a magnificent hall. The feeling of madness instantly vanished without a trace. Hobert let out a long sigh of relief. At this moment, Hobert was sitting beside an ancient and mottled bronze long table. At the end of the bronze long table, there was also a mysterious and powerful blurry figure sitting. Hobert thought to himself, Kay, you finally made a move. Many readers who see this part feel that Klein pulling in a stranger is somewhat abnormal. After all, Kay is a very cautious person. In the Source Castle, Hobert regained his memories related to the country of disorder. He could now confirm that his amnesia was a form of self-protection. Only within the source material, which could block pollution from top-tier sequences or outer deities, could those memories be restored. Hobert then realized that he and the country of disorder should have a connection similar to that between Klein and the Source Castle. However, there was no harm without comparison. Look at the Source Castle, it could immediately allow Klein, who had just transmigrated, to initiate a betrayal meeting, to immediately initiate the Tarot Club. But the country of disorder, which was bound to him, was a trap. Hobert smiled bitterly in his heart before getting up and saying, Great and mysterious the Fool, thank you for your help. If Kay hadn't intervened in time, Hobert felt he would have probably gone insane, or at least been mad for several hours even if he was lucky. Thinking that his adoptive mother, younger sister, and younger brother were all sleeping at this moment, and his adoptive father had been on a business trip for half a month and wasn't home, there was almost no one to stop him after he went mad. The consequences of falling into madness were simply unimaginable. Klein ignored Hobert's thanks, as if saying, this is an insignificant matter. He asked in a mysterious and deep voice, where did you learn my name? At this time, Klein was also a bit bewildered. He had only designed his 3-stage honorific name a week ago. After he told his honorific name to Justice and the hanged man above the gray fog, he had been harassed daily by this young man in front of him. The key was that this young man recited the Fool's honorific name in the middle of the night every time, waking Klein up every time. Of course, what puzzled Klein the most was where the other party had learned the Fool's honorific name, which sent shivers down his spine and gave him a strong sense of crisis. If Klein hadn't seen signs of this young man losing control today, he would not have pulled such a large uncertain factor onto the gray fog. Regarding this question, Hobert had already thought of the answer. Respected the fool, I started experiencing signs of madness about a month ago. I prayed for divine help, but received no response. Just when I was most helpless, a gray fog appeared in my mind, and I heard your honorific name. This answer was very unscientific, but this was a mystical world, wasn't it? Being unscientific was the norm. Klein's bewilderment deepened. He even suspected whether the gray fog here had taken the liberty of revealing his honorific name. Hobert skipped this topic. How can I thank you for your help? No need to thank me. Klein had already come into contact with a lot of mysticism knowledge. Regarding Hobert's explanation, he couldn't say he believed it, but he couldn't say he disbelieved it either. Hobert then asked, respected the fool, how can I escape the fate of madness? After asking, he regretted it a bit. The current Mr. the Fool's knowledge of mysticism was not as extensive as his own. Asking this might embarrass the fool. So Hobert immediately followed up, what kind of sacrifice do I need to make to escape the fate of madness? I am the fool who likes equivalent exchange, I do not need your sacrifice. Klein was now able to respond easily, you don't seem to have consumed a potion. Did you gradually go mad after coming into contact with some extraordinary item? Above this gray fog, Klein could use his spirit vision to distinguish whether a person had consumed a potion. The depths of this young man's aura were somewhat darker than a normal person's, but it was certain that this young man was not a beander. Then there were only two reasons why an ordinary person would lose control. One was being born half a sequence 9, and the other was accidentally coming into contact with an extraordinary event or extraordinary item, and being polluted by a sealed artifact. If he was born half a sequence 9, then this young man would either have gone mad long ago or would not be too affected by extraordinary characteristics. Just like when he followed old Neil to the black market a few days ago, he met the monster, the Demosaur at the Evil Dragon Bar, which was an example of someone with too high spirituality who couldn't control the half-sequence 9 extraordinary characteristics within his body. Then there was only one answer. He must have come into contact with a sealed artifact or an extraordinary item to exhibit such symptoms. That's what puzzles me, Hobert replied. I haven't consumed a potion, nor have I come into contact. At least, I don't believe I've come into contact with any extraordinary items. As for the madness starting after transmigration, he certainly couldn't reveal that to Klein yet. The fool was silent for a few seconds. There are two people similar to you who were pulled here by me for other reasons. They hoped that I could hold regular gatherings for formula trading, material buying and selling, information exchange, and task delegation, and I agreed to them. You are a person who understands mysticism knowledge. You can use your knowledge to conduct equivalent exchanges with me or with others. Your doubts will be answered here, and your problems will also be solved. Hobert said, this is my honor. The fool said, every Monday, 3 in the afternoon, exclude interference. He said, they decided to use the names of tarot cards as their respective codenames. You can also choose a codename for yourself. A set of tarot cards appeared before Hobert, and his mood immediately became complicated. Firstly, he hadn't expected to join the tarot club in such a way, to enter the extraordinary world in such a way. And all of this was inevitable, because he had been bound to the country of disorder from the very beginning of coming to this world. Why did the country of disorder appear on the North Continent? Had the celestial worthy's seal weakened to this extent? Or, was this the plan of some deity? To find out these things, he had to enter the extraordinary world, so joining the extraordinary world was inevitable. Let fate decide my codename. Hobert shuffled the cards casually and then drew one, Emperor. This codename is so high profile. The symbol on the chair behind Hobert was awakened. It was an abstract throne pattern drawn with a symbol representing chaos and distortion. The fool declared, your codename is Emperor. Pay attention to the gathering time. Go back. After sending Hobert back into the Red Star, Klein did not leave immediately, but performed a divination to confirm that Emperor was not dangerous. It was just that Emperor was not a beander but knew a lot about beanders, which was very unusual. Let's observe for now, Klein thought. Anyway, no one can harm me above this fog. Then he also left the gray fog above. Tomorrow, Mr. the Fool still had to go to work, so he had to quickly catch up on sleep. On the other side, after Hobert returned to his body, he found himself lying on the ground in a distorted posture. His pajamas were soaked with sweat, and his hair was wet with sweat. It was as if he had bathed in sweat. Hobert was once again grateful that he knew of the Fool's existence. The sky outside was already faintly lit. Hobert had completely lost his sleepiness. Today was Monday, and in the afternoon, he would attend the Tarot Club for the first time. New book released, seeking collections, seeking recommendation tickets. This is author's fourth book, reputation guaranteed, feel free to dive in. In the early morning, Hobert left his room and went to the dining room on the first floor, where his sister and brother were already eating breakfast. His adoptive father, Christine Jeffrey, was a Commodore, but he didn't seem to be highly valued. However, even if he wasn't highly valued, a Commodore was still a high-ranking officer and a prominent figure in Backland's upper society, owning a spacious two-story villa and a sizable garden in Queens District. Furthermore, his adopted son Hobert, his daughter Donna, who was a year younger than Hobert, and his son Tyrone, who was 3 years younger than Hobert, could all attend Backland's top public elementary and middle schools, and easily get into Backland University, known as Rowan's #1 academic institution. However, it was still far from the residences and treatment enjoyed by nobles. The reason Hobert concluded that his adoptive father Christine was not highly valued was that his adoptive parents' family was not very wealthy. He remembered that Emilius, who was also a general, seemed very rich. And the private money Hobert had saved recently amounted to only £15, which was probably less than a fraction of Miss Justice's pocket money. However, compared to Kay, Hobert's starting situation was much better. He remembered that Kay's initial capital was only about £1, which even included the food expenses for him and his 2 siblings. Donna, with her naturally curly golden hair, guarded the milk and sweet bread rolls in front of her and said, "Hobert, you don't seem to be in good spirits." Hobert sat at the dining table and casually replied, "I had insomnia last night." A maid served Hobert's breakfast, which included salad and fried eggs, a very hearty meal. Hobert glanced at the black tea and said, "Just give me a glass of milk instead." Even after being transmigrated for so long, he was still somewhat unaccustomed to drinking tea or coffee first thing in the morning. However, he quickly got used to being served breakfast. Just as the 3 of them were about to finish breakfast, Hobert's adoptive mother Monliza appeared on the 2nd floor. "Hobert, come home early this afternoon. Your father is returning today, and he said he has something important to discuss with you." Hobert stood up and said, "All right, mother." Donna happily said, "Dad is coming back today. I wonder what gift he brought me." "Oh, my dear, you still have hope for your father's gifts." Monliza rubbed her forehead. "Believe me, I've been married to your father for so many years, and I've never received a single satisfactory gift." Donna laughed, "That's because Dad doesn't have a good personal valet." The 3 siblings finished breakfast while chatting, then went back to change their clothes, gathered their study materials, and took the family carriage to their respective schools. Hobert was studying law at Backland University. In the afternoon, he secretly skipped class and found a secluded equipment room to prepare for the upcoming Tarot Club. As soon as 3 o'clock arrived, Hobert seemed to suddenly enter a dense, impenetrable gray-white mist, and then a magnificent hall and a long bronze table materialized before his eyes. Miss Justice Audrey curtsied, "Good afternoon, Mr. Fool. It's a pity there's no fine wine here, otherwise, we could toast to your successful attempt." She and the hanged man had just attempted last week to send a prayer to Mr. Fool using the Fool's 3-stage honorific name, and they both received a response from the Fool. This once again refreshed their understanding of the Fool's power, though what they didn't know was that a certain new member repeatedly used the 3-stage honorific name, disturbing the Fool's good sleep. Miss Justice's pause in the middle was because she noticed the new member, so she habitually began to observe while speaking. The new member was a male, not very old, and looked very energetic, likely a young person who enjoyed sports. He appeared calm, without the nervousness and surprise of a first-time visitor to the tarot club. His attire was somewhat blurry, but it was generally discernible that the material was exquisite, the style novel, and it had a distinct Ruin Kingdom flair. Miss Justice concluded, he should be born into Ruin's upper society, likely living in Backland. Though young, he appears very steady and calm. Miss Justice's living environment was a whole level superior to Hobert's. She and her two elder brothers were taught by tutors at home and didn't need to attend grammar schools or universities at all. The illegitimate children of Earl Hall, or the children of family members who hadn't inherited titles, would receive the same level of education as Hobert. It was precisely because of this that she couldn't immediately guess that Hobert was a university student. On the other side of the long table, the hanged man Alger also praised Mr. Fool, your power far exceeds our imagination. He also saw the new member, which made him frown. Although Mr. Fool was very powerful, he and Miss Justice should have been notified before a new member joined. If he hadn't just witnessed the Fool's power, he would definitely have protested. The Fool said, "Very good, this indicates that we are on a fruitful path. In the future, if you have matters and cannot make it on Monday afternoon, you can perform the ritual in advance and inform me." He then added, "As you can see, the Tarot Club has a new member." Then the Fool began to introduce them. "This is Miss Justice, this is Mr. Hanged Man, and the new member is Mr. Emperor." "Good afternoon, Mr. Emperor." Miss Justice greeted with a smile. This Mr. Emperor was likely a member of Ruin's upper society, which made Miss Justice feel somewhat familiar with him. "Good afternoon," Hobert said, "it's an honor to attend your gathering." The hanged man, however, did not greet him, merely observed Hobert for a moment. The gathering officially began. Miss Justice first gave the Fool a page from Emperor Rosel's diary. She kindly reminded Hobert, the notes written in special symbols left by Emperor Rosel were originally his diaries. "Mr. Fool is very interested in these diaries. You can collect those diaries and trade them with Mr. Fool." Hobert politely said, "Thank you for the reminder." He thought to himself, "I already know this, it's simplified Chinese." But then again, Miss Justice is truly kind-hearted. Just as he thought of this, he noticed that the atmosphere in the hall was somewhat off. Miss Justice, the hanged man, and even the Fool were staring intently at him, as if he were a monster. "Oh no," Hobert belatedly realized. "When I heard about Emperor Rosel's diary, I didn't show enough surprise, even a little surprise would have been good. What should I do now? Should I quickly explain, or pretend to have a very strong background?" Soon, he realized that whether he explained or not, the final outcome seemed to be the same. His identity would appear very mysterious. Then he wouldn't explain and let them imagine. The Fool, Klein. What kind of monster did I just pull in? He also knows that's Rosel's diary. Could he also be impossible? To borrow a phrase from Emperor Rosel, I am the child of fortune of this era. No, I can't be complacent. I need to test him when I get the chance to see if he's also a transmigrator. Then again, if he really is a fellow countryman, he might be more trustworthy. Justice, Audrey, he actually knows that's a diary. He wouldn't also be able to understand those special symbols, would he? Are there that many people in this world who understand these symbols? Or has he mastered relevant mysticism knowledge? Then he must come from a beander family or a beander organization. The hanged man, Alger, I should have thought of it earlier. A new member recognized by the Fool must have something extraordinary about him. I actually doubted the Fool just now, thankfully, I didn't show my doubt. A few seconds later, their second round of scrutiny of Hobert ended, but by then, they no longer underestimated Hobert as they had at the beginning of the gathering. Next was the Fool's time to read the diary. Hobert also wanted to take a look, as there were many of Rosel's diaries, and he could no longer recall the specific content of the diary that appeared at this gathering. After the Fool finished reading, Miss Justice asked, "Mr. Fool, can we popularize knowledge like acting and digestion to the new member? The fool glanced at Hobert, seeing no sign of surprise from him. I have already received your payment. You can popularize it, or you can use this knowledge for equivalent exchange. He had an expression like he wasn't going to snatch candy from a child. However, the new member should already know this knowledge. At this moment, Klein and Audrey had similar suspicions, believing that the Emperor should be a member of a beander family or beander organization. Even so, it was still very abnormal for the Emperor, who was not a beander, to know so much beander knowledge. Imagine who would let non-beander family members or organization members learn beander knowledge. Miss Justice also realized this. Mr. Emperor, do you know about acting and digestion? As the fool said, I know this knowledge. Hobert said with a wry smile, but I don't need this knowledge yet, because I haven't consumed a potion. Miss Justice didn't feel much, but the hanged man was once again shocked. Before, he had thought he knew a lot and could achieve great things in the extraordinary world. Especially Miss Justice's ignorance, which had always made him feel good about himself. But today, Hobert poured a bucket of cold water on him. His thoughts were similar to the fool's. It was very abnormal for an ordinary person to know so much beander knowledge. Hobert then said, "Thank you, Mr. Fool, for allowing me to join this gathering. I hope to find the reason for my gradual madness here." He briefly summarized his experiences of the past month. If everyone can help me find the cause, I can offer some beander knowledge that you absolutely do not know for equivalent exchange. However, I must inform you in advance that I am not a born half-sequence 9. I have thought back countless times, and I did not come into contact with any extraordinary item that could pollute me a month ago. Of course, it's also possible that I was unknowingly polluted, but if that were the case, I should have come into contact with the same extraordinary item more than once, and I should have noticed something. The hanged man, who had wanted to regain his confidence, fell silent. All the reasons he could think of were already in Hobert's description. Miss Justice then weakly asked, "Mr. Emperor, please, what does half-sequence 9 feet mean? What payment do I need to offer for this question?" Hobert smiled. "I can answer this question for free. Consider it a welcoming gift for you, and a reward for your kind heart." Miss Justice happily said, "Thank you for your generosity." The so-called half-sequence 9 feet refers to some people who are born with extraordinary characteristics, Hobert explained. This usually happens when both parents are powerful beanders, or one parent is a powerful beander. During the reproductive process, the parent's extraordinary characteristics have a certain probability of being inherited by the newborn. The more extraordinary characteristics of a certain sequence the parents have, the greater the probability of inheritance. But most of the time, this is not a fortunate thing, because that child can only choose the extraordinary pathway inherited from their parents from birth. Moreover, during infancy, it's fine if the parents can help them control their extraordinary characteristics, but if the parents cannot help them control, how can an infant have the ability to control extraordinary characteristics? They will most likely go mad from a young age. Miss Justice nodded. "Thank you for your answer. I didn't expect such unfortunate things to happen in the extraordinary world." Hobert sighed. "Misfortune is the norm in the extraordinary world. Just like me, I was eating hot pot and singing songs, and suddenly I was about to go mad." At this moment, the fool suddenly said in a supreme voice, "What you are experiencing is a curse." This conclusion was the result of his discussion with old Neil today. Hobert's thoughts suddenly broadened. "Oh, right, there's also the possibility of a curse." But then another problem arose. Who would curse an orphan who had never seen his biological parents since childhood? If it were his adoptive father's political enemies, they would curse Donna or Tyrone, right? Hobert then thought, perhaps this disaster was indeed brought about by his biological parents whom he had never met. Their deaths at a young age were abnormal in themselves. Was it a curse placed on their child by their biological parents' enemies? He thought that he could have a good talk with his adoptive father this afternoon and take the opportunity to ask for some information about his biological parents. Hobert said to the fool, "This gives my investigation a new direction. How should I thank you for your answer?" "Rosal's diary," the fool said, "or information about the Antigonus family, even what I already know would suffice." Hobert said, "I can pay you the requested compensation now." Antigonus first appeared in the Solomon Empire era. He established his own kingdom in the Hornasus Mountains, and from then on, the Antigonus family stepped onto the stage of history. In the fourth epoch, Antigonus had a very good relationship with two great figures, but I cannot mention these two great figures here for now. I believe the fool knows who those two great figures are. With the fool's protection here, it's fine for me to discuss them, but if it were outside, merely discussing them would invite disaster. So, for the sake of Miss Justice and the hanged man's safety, we will discuss them when the two of you are strong enough. The fool, Klein gave a wry smile. "I really don't know, but it's probably for the best. After all, this is a mysterious world, and it's possible that merely discussing certain people or events could bring disaster. The Emperor knows a lot of hidden knowledge. It was a good decision to bring him in." "Justice," Audrey exclaimed, "how terrifying, how terrifying. Is this the Beander world? To think that talking about certain people could invite disaster." The hanged man, Alger thought, "The Beander knowledge the Emperor possesses seems quite advanced. Fortunately, I didn't show him any disrespect earlier." Hobert continued, "Later, the Antigonus family became a prominent family during the Four Emperors period because they supported the Blood Emperor's rule. However, after the Blood Emperor's downfall, Antigonus was hunted by the gods and lost control for some reason, and the kingdom he established was also destroyed. There are also rumors that Antigonus is still sleeping in Honachus's palace, but no one can verify it. After that, there was no more news of the Antigonus family. I believe that even if their descendants escaped the gods' pursuit, they are now merely collateral branches and can no longer restore their former glory." The other three fell into varying degrees of silence. The phrase, "hunted by the gods," shocked them greatly. Although they all believed in the existence of gods, hearing of their deeds still made them want to cover their ears. Klein also noticed that Hobert said, "Antigonus was hunted by the gods, not the Antigonus family was hunted." Could it be that the person who founded the Antigonus family was the same person hunted by the gods? As for the possibility that Antigonus might still be sleeping in Honachus's palace, this was very valuable information for Klein, almost explaining the origin of the whispers he heard when he became a Beander. Hobert saw their silence and felt a bit helpless. He had already been very careful in what he said, not mentioning the angel King Adam and Ammon, nor saying that Antigonus was a descendant of an ancient god or the Black Knight goddess's little brother. He hadn't expected that even with his careful handling of the information, it would still shock everyone so much. The hanged man even began to suspect, is the Emperor, like Mr. Fool, also some evil god who is awakening? Otherwise, how could he know so much hidden information? So, he asked, trying his luck, "Mr. Emperor, besides the Storm Church, where else can I obtain the wind-blessed potion formula? What kind of compensation should I offer for the relevant information? I haven't decided on the specific compensation yet. Let's owe it for now, and I'll ask for it when I need it." Hobert didn't plan to give the hanged man a meeting gift. "As for the value of my information, you can ask Mr. Fool to be a witness." The hanged man was startled, not expecting the Emperor to actually know other ways to obtain the Sailor Pathway potion. "No problem." Hobert asked, "Have you heard of the elf?" "I have," the hanged man replied, "but that's a race that was annihilated a long time ago." "Yes, the elf no longer exist," Hobert said. "But don't underestimate ancient mythical creatures. Perhaps some of their powerful individuals can use certain extraordinary items to preserve their will. Of course, I don't recommend you search for such extraordinary items, as it's very dangerous. I think you should have some understanding that the extraordinary pathway mastered by the elf is the same as your pathway. Furthermore, to my knowledge, there are many elf ruins at sea. I think you should be able to find what you're looking for there." The hanged man fell silent, having to admit that Hobert had provided him with a completely new and feasible idea. The fool also fell into contemplation. He realized that in the distant second epoch and third epoch, many hidden extraordinary events had occurred, so much so that the current epoch was still affected by those extraordinary events. Justice couldn't suppress her curiosity to learn about ancient mythical creatures, but Hobert had just given her a meeting gift, so she felt too embarrassed to ask further. After more than 10 seconds, the hanged man finally said, "Thank you for your answer. I will pay you equivalent compensation in the future." Next came the information exchange segment. Hobert sat silently in his chair until the fool announced the end of the gathering. Back in reality, Hobert recalled the recent gathering. Kay had given him a very good idea. At this moment, he suddenly thought that it would definitely be beneficial to stick with the protagonist as much as possible, as he had a halo around him. Usually, after classes in the afternoon, Hobert would play cricket with his classmates for an hour or two, or practice fencing together. When it was hot, he would also go swimming. Hobert had sighed more than once that in an era without the internet, university students' arrangements for their free time were much healthier. However, today, due to his mother's instructions, Hobert took a hired carriage home after school. When he first transmigrated, following the principle of saving every penny, Hobert had taken public carriages home for several consecutive days. After all, that only cost 6 pence, while a hired carriage cost between 2 soul and 3 soul depending on the carriage's class. However, when his adoptive mother found out about this, she severely criticized Hobert, because Hobert's behavior would make neighbors or Hobert's classmates think if the Jeffrey family was going bankrupt. Or it would make others think that the Jeffrey family was too harsh on their adopted son. Hobert could only conform to the values of this world and bury his concept of frugality deep in his heart. As soon as he entered the courtyard gate, the butler took Hobert's schoolbag and said, "Young Master Hobert, the master has asked you to come to the study for a talk." "All right." Hobert went to the study door with the butler. The butler knocked on the door first and announced their arrival. After receiving permission from his adoptive father, Christine, Hobert opened the door and first saw his adoptive father sitting behind the desk. He looked only in his 30s, without a beard. Even when he smiled, his entire being still exuded a strong sense of authority. Before Hobert transmigrated, there was already some estrangement between him and his adoptive parents. After transmigrating, this estrangement grew even larger. Hobert had always called them father and mother, unlike Donna and Tyrone who called them papa and mama. Christine pointed to the chair opposite the desk. "Sit." Hobert felt very willing to obey his adoptive father's command, which was also why he believed his adoptive father was a beander. Christine asked, "I heard that you've been absent-minded lately, and you've been having some insomnia, and you occasionally show some signs of madness without realizing it." Hobert was startled. "I've already tried my best to hide the feeling of madness within me." "Some things you can't hide just because you want to," Christine sighed. "We haven't talked about your biological father in a long time, have we?" Yes. Hobert didn't expect his adoptive father to actually bring up his biological parents on his own, which saved him the trouble of finding a topic to ask about. Christine said, "There's a curse in your family's bloodline. The book's group number, 373,209,103. Password: I am not Aemon. Everyone is welcome to join the group. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Hello everyone, thank you for reading this book. At the beginning of the book, the author would like to introduce himself and the general idea behind this book. The author has previously written 2 relatively successful works. Well, I can only say they haven't failed, and the author's level is about to reach 4. I am telling you this so you know that the author has experience in finishing works and is a serious writer, so you can rest assured and dive in. Although the author's skill is limited, I am willing to do my best to write this book well. Please bear with me for any shortcomings. The author really likes the book, Strange, and just finished a 3rd reread before the new year. At that time, the idea of writing a fanfiction for strange, came to mind. But which sequence should I choose? The diviner sequence definitely cannot be chosen, as it would conflict with K. The Black Knight goddess has always been a positive figure, though she has also planned and participated in many conspiracies, and she is the true god of the sleepless sequence. Unless a god war occurs and the goddess falls, it will be difficult for this sequence to rise. Sequences like Sailor, Spectator, Reader, Singer, Secret Supplicant, etc., are just as awkward as the sleepless sequence. This was a problem Emperor Rosal once encountered. So, only a sequence without a true god has room for development. The assassin sequence definitely cannot be chosen, because it would turn into a female later, which would be extremely awkward. As for the hunter sequence, well, it's easy to die at the provoker stage. We also need to try to avoid sequences like Mother and Moon, which have been corrupted by outer gods. After much deliberation, only the lawyer sequence or arbitrator sequence are the most suitable. However, considering that Miss Hugh is already an arbitrator, the protagonist can only choose lawyer. This way, after the protagonist becomes an old one, Miss Hugh can still advance to sequence 1. But a new problem arises: how to advance to Black Emperor without harming Emperor Rosal. Fortunately, at the end of the first part of Strange, K became a half-old one and obtained the error authority from Aemon, which provides a lot of room for maneuver. But for the specific method of operation, I'll keep you in suspense for now. Oh, hollow down pointing triangle D. There should be some old readers from the previous 2 books coming to support me. Old readers must know that while the author's skill may be limited, the fanfiction works written will not make people feel awkward. This is because the author sufficiently respects the original work and is willing to patiently recreate based on the original work. As for updates, there will be 2 updates daily before it goes on sale, because we have to wait for recommendations, which is customary, and 3 updates daily after it goes on sale. Occasionally, there will be extra updates. When monthly votes, recommendation votes, and rewards reach a certain amount, there will be extra updates, or if a reader friend has contributed to this book, there will also be extra updates as a thank you. In the past 2 years, the author has not stopped updating, even when ill. Updates are guaranteed. While the author could write more chapters per day, it would easily lead to watered-down content, which is a common problem in many fanfiction works. Although the author is not a famous writer, I am also a reader myself, so I am very unwilling to do that. I will also try my best to ensure quality in the mid to late stages. Finally, I would like to thank Brother Cuttlefish for lending his influence. I also want to thank all the reader friends. Your comments, votes, and rewards are all ways to motivate the author. Hobert frowned, not expecting K's prediction to be confirmed so quickly. You don't seem surprised, Christine asked with a smile. That's right, Hobert confessed. When I was in middle school, I was very interested in mysticism. About a month ago, I suddenly felt an indescribable sense of madness appear within me, and it's been getting worse. This is very similar to the curses described in mysticism. He paused and then said, I'm still quite surprised to hear you say that. So, some mystical knowledge might not be just legends or rumors, but actually exist. Christine said seriously, that's right. Behind the facade of the entire world, there truly exists an extraordinary world. He said, we need to have a heart-to-heart talk. Where should we start? Let's start with your biological father. I should have told you before that your biological father was my best friend. He was an outstanding person who reached heights many people could only dream of. At the same time, he was also the person most likely to end the curse in your family's bloodline. Christine said sadly, unfortunately, he still failed. Family. Hobert caught a key piece of information. He had never associated himself with any family before, as he had never met any of his blood relatives. Could he be the only one left in the family? Also, he wondered if his family was a beander family. Christine continued, your father, Rex, and I fought side by side in West Bayland. At that time, we talked about everything. He told me about the curse in your family's bloodline, and he also told me that he didn't plan to continue this cursed bloodline. But then he met your mother, and they were deeply in love. At your mother's insistence, and perhaps by fate's arrangement, you were born. Generally speaking, the curse in your family's bloodline would awaken on your 12th birthday, but your mother sealed it for you, buying you 10 years. She hoped you would have a carefree youth, an opportunity to enjoy the beauty of life, an opportunity to fall in love and kiss girls your age, and not be as stern-faced as your father always was. So, when she left, she made me swear to tell you a part of the truth after the curse awakened. Hobert felt a strong mix of joy and sadness filling his heart. He knew that wasn't his mother, and even the original owner's memories had no trace of a mother, but he was still deeply moved by the profound maternal love. Time really flies, Christine sighed. That was already 20 years ago. He continued, when you were just born, Rex's condition was already very grim. In his last moments, he was still worried about how you would fight the curse in your bloodline in the future. He wanted you to choose for yourself. One path was to remain an ordinary person, but you would be in a semi-mad state. However, your biological father left you enough wealth, and I would send you to a manor in the suburbs and help you select loyal servants. Rex made a deal with the School of Life before he died. After you turn 45, you will have enough luck to gradually awaken from your semi-mad state, and you can enjoy the rest of your life as an ordinary person. The other path is to become a beander. When you become a Sequence 9 beander, your state of madness will be greatly reduced. But Rex made sure I warned you. First, you can only choose the potion from the lawyer pathway, because when your family's curse awakens, it will make you half a Sequence 9 of the lawyer pathway. Second, after you become a beander or half a year after advancement, the sense of madness will gradually intensify again. At that time, the potion will be like opium to you. No matter whether you have digested the previous potion well or not, you will be eager to advance. Or choose not to advance and fight against the endless madness, but this will also make your emotions very unstable, and the vast majority of people in your family died in losing control. Christine said, you can think about it first, there's no need to rush to give me an answer. Oh, by the way, I also need to remind you that I only have the potion formulas for Sequence 9 and Sequence 8 of the lawyer pathway here. Hobert was stunned. Did my father not leave behind formulas for higher sequences? No, this is a test from Rex for you, Christine said. Or perhaps your father preferred you to be an ordinary person. Hobert twitched his mouth. Others were scamming their fathers, but the original owner's father was an expert at scamming his son. Then he thought about how his codename in the Tarot Club was the Emperor, and the true god of the lawyer pathway seemed to be the Black Emperor. Was this a coincidence? This was an extraordinary world. How could there be such a coincidence? Hobert pondered for a moment and then said, actually, there's no need to consider. I can't waste the best years of my life in a state of madness. Of course, it was also because the dear Mr. Fool would obtain the Black Emperor card of the Blasphemy card in half a year. As long as he traded with the Fool, he could obtain the subsequent potion formulas. Christine said, I still advise you to consider it. There are people all over this world who haven't made the most of their best years, and they're still living perfectly fine. Hobert shook his head. I still prefer to hold my destiny in my own hands, rather than entrusting it to enough luck. Father, please give me the Sequence 9 potion. I will continue the family's business. When I become strong enough, I will be able to eliminate the curse in my bloodline. Christine burst into laughter. Rex would be very pleased to see this. He said, I respect your choice. With that, he took a piece of parchment from a drawer and went to a square cabinet by the bookshelf. Opening the cabinet door, inside were a set of beakers and many extraordinary materials in small bottles or jars. Christine placed the parchment on the square cabinet, took out a beaker, and began to concoct the potion. He didn't ask Hobert to leave, so Hobert stepped forward and glanced at the contents on the parchment. As Hobert had guessed, it was the lawyer potion formula. Main ingredients: 1 eye of a fear demon worm, 1 fruit of a flash-patterned tree. Auxiliary ingredients: 1 black iris, 6 leaves of a monkey-faced orchid, 8 grams of black heart grass juice, 120 grams of white wine. After seeing the formula, Hobert was surprised, not expecting the potion formula to require wine. His thoughts wandered as he considered, it seems that people with alcohol allergies can't be lawyers. At this moment, he was both excited and anxious, so he used random thoughts as an outlet. Christine first added the auxiliary ingredients to the beaker, then used tweezers to place a black eyeball, which was clearly lifeless yet involuntarily instilled fear, into the beaker. Finally, a fruit shaped like a peeled walnut was added. After all the ingredients were added to the beaker, without stirring, all the extraordinary materials instantly melted. After a small amount of black, hallucinatory mist emerged from the beaker, the deep black liquid potion was complete. Christine pushed it towards Hobert. This is the sequence 9 feet lawyer potion. Christine looked at the dark black potion and finally reminded, you still have one last chance to back out. Drink it, and you'll become a beander, completely bidding farewell to the life of an ordinary person. Hobert picked up the beaker. Before I lose the courage to forge ahead. He drank the potion in one gulp. As soon as the dark black potion entered his stomach, Hobert involuntarily trembled. For a split second, the world before his eyes seemed to distort. At the same time, fragmented whispers echoed in Hobert's ears. The whispers were so indistinct that he couldn't even make out what was being said. Soon, he had some realization. In previous eras, only Solomon had successfully advanced to become a Black Emperor, but he fell during the Four Emperors' War. Later, because Rosal became the new Black Emperor, Solomon completely lost the possibility of rebirth. Therefore, Solomon had almost no influence on lower sequence beyonders of the same sequence, and Rosal's current state was very poor. Hobert couldn't recall exactly how bad it was. It seemed that knowing the Emperor's state would lead to contamination. In short, the Emperor was also unable to influence lower sequence beyonders of the same sequence at this time. Because the lawyer pathway had no existing true gods or high sequence individuals, beyonders on this pathway would not hear obvious whispers when advancing. Then, Hobert saw a small crack on a wooden board on the bookshelf and a small dent on the cover of a book. Based on these phenomena, Hobert analyzed that the bookshelf in front of him would likely start to break from that wooden board, and the book would likely start to break from that small dent. These were the flaws of the bookshelf and the book. But then, this strange vision disappeared, and the involuntary trembling sensation also vanished. Seeing Hobert's condition stabilize, Christine poured a glass of the white wine they had just used for him and herself. Although mastering the sequence 9 potion isn't very difficult, I still congratulate you. Thank you. Hobert took the wine glass, clinked it with Christine's, and they both drank it all. Christine put away the potion formula, and the two of them sat back down at the desk. Christine began to explain the main abilities of a lawyer. I heard your father mention that a lawyer can find the weaknesses of objects or opponents in front of them from the information they see and hear. However, you must be cautious during combat, because enemies generally know their own weaknesses, so they are very likely to have ways to protect their weaknesses. Additionally, your eloquence will become very good, and you can also distort some simple thoughts of others, but it's best to use it when your opponent is unprepared. He spread his hands. That's all I know. Other abilities and precautions, you need to explore yourself. Then Christine began to teach Hobert how to activate and deactivate spirit vision. However, a lawyer's spirit vision cannot see a person's etheric body and mental body, only the obvious flaws of the surrounding scenery or people. But when Hobert used spirit vision to examine Christine, he couldn't find any weaknesses on her. Christine smiled. You must remember, when you can't see any flaws on a person, it often means that the person in front of you is currently insurmountable. Hobert was stunned, a truly refreshing and unique way of boasting. He immediately realized that Christine was very likely a middle sequence powerhouse. Christine also explained some extraordinary knowledge, such as the acting method, and finally, she said, I will arrange for you to work as a lawyer's assistant at a law firm the day after tomorrow or on Thursday. I hope you find the elements of being a lawyer there. It wasn't until the end of the conversation that Hobert had a chance to ask, "Who cursed my family, or rather, the Heller family?" Hobert's biological father's full name was Rex Heller. After Christine adopted Hobert, Hobert took his adoptive father's surname. Christine seemed to recall something from the past and only spoke after more than half a minute. "I promised Rex that I would tell you all the truth, all the truth I know, only after you fully master the Sequence 8 potion. At that time, you will face another choice. Before then, the less you know, the better." Hobert nodded. All right. Since the other party wouldn't say, he planned to use his biological father's information to investigate himself once he became familiar with the lawyer's abilities. The conversation ended there. As Hobert closed the study door, he saw Christine behind the desk seemingly lost in thought, sitting there in a daze. After leaving the study, Hobert thought of a question: how did Christine know he showed signs of losing control? He had been on a business trip for more than half a month, and before he left, the sense of madness on Hobert wasn't that strong. No one had noticed anything unusual. It must have been after Christine left for her business trip that someone discovered the abnormality on Hobert and informed Christine. Soon, Hobert thought of two possibilities. One was his adoptive mother, Monliza, and the other was the butler, Vok. However, Hobert's speculation stopped there. Continuing to deduce further was meaningless, and there was no need to verify it. It was enough to know it himself. By dinner time, Christine had returned to her usual self, chatting and laughing with her family, occasionally even bickering with her daughter. The atmosphere of this family was quite good, only Hobert felt somewhat alienated and rarely spoke at the dinner table. After dinner, Hobert read for a while, and soon he was too sleepy to keep his eyes open. He hadn't slept well yesterday, and today he had attended the tarot club and consumed a potion, leaving him physically and mentally exhausted. Unconsciously, Hobert entered the country of disorder again in his dream. The difference was that before, he always appeared near the ancient village at the foot of the mountain in the country of disorder, but this time he appeared at the summit. Here was a chair that looked like it was made of stone and jade, standing in the grass, covered with some moss. It seemed to be part of the mountain. In front of the chair, there was a huge pool of water. The water in the pool was extremely dark, but strangely, the rocks at the bottom of the lake could be seen. In the dark water, countless white star-like light clusters flickered, slowly drifting like jellyfish, appearing to be alive. Hobert sat thoughtfully on the stone chair. At this moment, he felt that he had established some special connection with the country of disorder. At this time, he saw the blurred figure that had been chasing him and screaming now floating towards him. That figure seemed a bit clearer. He could clearly see that it was a male. Hobert waved his hand towards the black pool, and the blurred figure was stuffed into the pool by him. The figure struggled in the pool but couldn't get out. Hobert immediately understood that now that he had become a beander, he had some control over the country of disorder. Without a doubt, the stone chair was a throne, and as long as Hobert sat on it, a part of the country of disorder would submit to him. Hobert watched the figure struggle in the pond, and he thought to himself, "Unless I allow it, you'll never get out of there in this lifetime." He sat on the stone throne and pondered for a while, gaining some ideas about the figure's origin. The figure might be the concretization of the Heller family's bloodline curse. The evidence was that every time he heard the figure's screams, he would fall into endless madness. Before this, the country of disorder had been providing him with some protection, which was why he didn't hear the figure's screams every time. However, because he didn't have the special connection with the country of disorder then as he did now, the country of disorder's protection for him was very limited. Thinking of this, Hobert let out a sigh of relief. If his guess was correct, then leaving the country of disorder this time wouldn't bring the painful feeling of madness, and if he could keep that figure trapped in the pond in the future, perhaps his own curse would disappear. Now that's more like it. Hobert muttered to himself, even if the country of disorder can't be like Source Castle and pull people into a network sales platform, being able to suppress my family's curse is still not a disgrace to its source material. He really wanted to leave the country of disorder right now to confirm whether his guess was correct, but then he thought that since he was already here, he might as well explore a bit first. First was the stone throne. Hobert felt his connection with the throne was the closest, but it seemed his control was only limited to the vicinity of the throne, extending at most into the pond, but no further. Hobert looked up at the clock tower hanging in the sky. He could feel that the clock tower, or rather the giant bell inside it, was very special, just like the throne. However, he couldn't go up to the sky and ascend that clock tower right now. Hobert guessed that he might only be able to control that clock tower after reaching middle sequence. Then Hobert thought that the stone throne was too ordinary, completely lacking any majesty. He tried to change the throne's appearance, and as he expected, he could change the throne's appearance according to his imagination. For example, after a brief thought, the stone throne transformed into a round-backed armchair. Hobert wondered if he should turn it into the Emperor's dragon throne from ancient costume TV dramas. But the style of a dragon throne didn't match the world he was in at all, so he decided to think of a Western fantasy-style seat instead. Thus, he thought of the Iron Throne, the throne in A Song of Ice and Fire, symbolizing the king's supreme authority. Hobert's thoughts shifted, and the throne beneath him transformed into a throne over 10 meters high, forged from countless iron swords. In front of the throne were steps made of sharp swords, and Hobert seemed to be sitting amidst a thorny thicket of sharp blades. Hobert nodded with satisfaction. Now it looked more like a throne. Then he turned his gaze to the pond in front of him. Two star-like light clusters were emitting white light. Hobert tried to approach them, and they indeed floated towards the throne. However, most of the other stars were still white light clusters of varying sizes, completely beyond Hobert's control. Hobert estimated that he might only be able to control more stars after his own promotion. He decided to first look at the two stars that he could control. He chose one of them and poured his mental power into it. Then he saw a middle-aged man in bed. Hobert had the urge to cover his face and quickly withdrew his attention. He hadn't expected that his first use of the Country of Disorder's power would be to see such a stimulating scene. Based on his intuition, Hobert found that he couldn't pull people's spiritual bodies into the Country of Disorder like he could when attending the Tarot Club, but he seemed to be able to communicate with the other party. However, Hobert didn't intend to speak to the middle-aged man who was currently busy. Even if he were to cough, he would probably scare the couple, possibly husband and wife, and give them psychological trauma, and it wouldn't be right to be so unkind. After some thought, Hobert found another cluster of stars emitting white light and poured his attention into it. Immediately after, he saw a young man hiding in the bushes in a dark jungle. At this moment, a brown-skinned middle-aged man cautiously searched over. When the time was right, the young man leapt out of the bushes and used a sneak attack to stab the middle-aged man in the lower back. The brown-skinned middle-aged man let out a disturbing roar, his eyes flashing with madness, appearing incredibly imposing. But the young man seemed completely unaffected, his offensive showing no signs of stopping. Hobert judged that this should be a low-sequence extraordinary battle, as the two people's strength far exceeded that of ordinary humans, and the surrounding trees were pushed askew by their fight. Soon, the middle-aged man's injuries began to affect his combat effectiveness and showed signs of losing control. The young man seized the opportunity, inflicted many new knife wounds on the middle-aged man, and finally slit his throat. The middle-aged man completely lost control, but before he could turn into a monster, the young man skillfully chopped off his head. After watching a good show, Hobert realized that trying to communicate with the young man at that moment would also easily give him psychological trauma, so he could only do it later. Soon, the middle-aged man's extraordinary characteristic diluted, revealing a gray light cluster resembling a miniature brain, even showing the folds on the brain. Hobert seemed to have some impression of the appearance of this extraordinary characteristic, but he couldn't recall which pathway it belonged to at the moment. Watching the young man collect his spoils, Hobert began to summarize. Using the two stars emitting white light, he could project true sight from the Country of Disorder into the outside world. However, he still couldn't pull people into the Country of Disorder. Clearly, the Country of Disorder's functions were very different from Source Castle. As for why these two stars with white light became his coordinates, Hobert wasn't very clear either, and could only observe more before making a summary. After these attempts, Hobert was very tired. He left the country of disorder and woke up from his dream. As he expected, there was no feeling of madness. However, Hobert did not believe that the family's curse had disappeared just like that. Even in the country of disorder, Hobert could only trap the blurry figure but couldn't completely eliminate it. It could only be considered as suppressing the curse. Hobert did not continue to think, he was too tired. He turned over and fell into a deep sleep. The next day, Hobert arrived at Backland University full of energy, but he had no mind for classes at all, constantly thinking about finding time to explore the country of disorder again. It was as if a child had received a beloved toy and constantly wanted to play with it. Especially since he had thought of some ways to actively enter the country of disorder, instead of passively entering in his dreams, which made him even more restless. Finally, in the afternoon, Hobert's two good friends, Bishop and Ulyana, invited him to afternoon tea. Hobert refused without thinking. "Sorry, I need to go to the equipment room." The entire upper society of the ruined kingdom had the habit of drinking afternoon tea, and it was sold in the school cafeteria in Backland. Hobert had gone with Bishop before, and the cheapest afternoon tea, set meal, still cost 2 soul and 3 pence. In his opinion, it was just a cup of tea and 2 plates of snacks, and even in a mid-range restaurant outside school, this price was enough for a steak. The key was that the cheapest set meal in the school was not wanted by anyone, and for someone with Hobert's family background, going for afternoon tea would cost 3 to 4 soul. If he ordered the cheapest afternoon tea, he would be laughed at by his classmates. So Hobert would avoid it if he could. He didn't have the habit of drinking afternoon tea, so why waste money? At this moment, Hobert remembered that his adoptive mother Christine clearly said that his biological father had left him a generous inheritance, but she had no intention of letting him inherit it. Ulyana smiled. "Hobert, you've been so strange lately. You used to love afternoon tea the most, and you even said it could reflect a gentleman's dignity and taste." At that time, I was out of my mind, Hobert thought fiercely to himself, but then he thought that university classmates were very important connections in this world, so he still needed to maintain them. So Hobert said, "Let me tell you both a secret of mine. My father is good friends with Barton lawyer from the Oslon Barton law firm. My father plans to arrange for me to be Barton lawyer's assistant this week. I didn't tell you before because this matter hadn't been confirmed, but now that it's confirmed, I'm very anxious and nervous. Sorry, I'm not in the mood for afternoon tea at all." Bishop laughed. "Hobert, this is a great opportunity. Barton lawyer is a first-class lawyer in Backland. If you perform well as his assistant, I believe you'll be qualified to go to court in at most 3 to 5 years. There were 2 types of courts in the ruined kingdom, the magistrate's court and the formal court, i.e., the criminal court, also known as the noble court. Legal assistants were only qualified to attend the magistrate's court, while only lawyers and lawyers were qualified to attend the formal court. However, the formal court was generally where lawyers contended, and ordinary lawyers basically still operated in the magistrate's court. The court Bishop referred to was the formal court. As long as Hobert had enough connections and resources and worked hard enough himself, he would soon become a formal lawyer in the legal sense. Hobert smiled. "I hope I have such good luck." Ulyana added, "But Hobert, you're still a bit strange lately. You used to praise the goddess often, but now, not once have I seen you praise the goddess all day." Christine's family were all Black Knight goddess believers, and Hobert was too, but he was not yet used to praising the goddess for everything. Moreover, in the past month, he had prayed to the goddess more than once, hoping that she could help him eliminate the sense of madness within him, but this fellow countryman might have been too busy and had never paid attention to him. So he was too lazy to praise the goddess anymore. Hobert smiled. Firm faith is often hidden deep within the heart. Ulyana nodded. Emperor Rosel's words are indeed very reasonable. Hobert immediately felt an urge to cover his face. The great emperor still didn't give later generations any chance to show off. "All right, both of you, I won't disturb your afternoon tea. When I get my first payment, I'll treat you to a meal at the restaurant. It's a deal, Bishop said with a grin. It's a deal. Hobert watched his two classmates leave before coming to the secluded equipment room. He first silently recited, "Open Sesame," a few times, but there was no reaction. Then he used the meditation Christine taught him to put himself in a state of emptiness, but he still couldn't establish a connection with the country of disorder. So he began to use the third method, walking and saying, "Blessed be the Xuanwang Immortal Venerable, blessed be the Xuanwang Heavenly Monarch, blessed be the Xuanwang Emperor, blessed be the Xuanwang Heavenly Venerable." After finishing these 4 incantations, Hobert's vision was submerged by a black tide, and before he could struggle, he saw the iron throne he had designed. Looking back, he had entered from the black pool, and the blurred figure he had previously confined in the pool was still in its original place. It worked. The country of disorder and the source castle were the same password. Immediately, Hobert realized that the country of disorder had been sealed by the Heavenly Venerable before, so using the method of entering the source castle could also bypass the Heavenly Venerable's seal and enter the country of disorder. When Klein first arrived in this world, he established a subtle connection with the source castle, and when Hobert arrived in this world, he established a subtle connection with the country of disorder. This was a binding from destiny to the spiritual body, or soul, and this was also the key to entering the source material. Having understood this point, and now having a way to actively enter the country of disorder, Hobert left the country of disorder, as he was currently at school and could not guarantee that no classmates or teachers would disturb him in the secluded equipment room. When school was dismissed in the afternoon, the butler Vok came to help Hobert process his leave of absence. Hobert informed his mentors of his new developments and hoped that he could write to them for help when he encountered difficulties in the future. Facing such a promising student, the mentors were, of course, very happy to agree to exchange letters with Hobert. After bidding farewell to Bishop and Ulyana again, Vok drove Hobert to the Aslan Barton law firm, where he met Barton lawyer, Barton Stanny. This law firm was founded by Aslan and Barton in partnership. Both of them were very famous lawyers in Backland, having resolved many disputes for nobles and wealthy individuals. Barton looked about 40 years old, with light yellow hair and deep blue eyes, his gaze as sharp as an eagle's. He said, "I was once comrades in arms with your father, and I know your father's original intention in sending you here." At this point, Barton picked up a folder from his desk. "This is an undisputed case. Tomorrow, you will act as the plaintiff's lawyer in the magistrate's court." Finally, he said meaningfully, "Perceive well how to be a good lawyer." Hobert expressed his gratitude while thinking to himself, is the acting method so widespread? Christine, having become a brigadier general in his 30s, certainly knew about the acting method, but he didn't expect Barton to know about it as well. This lawyer must also be a beander. Thinking of this, Hobert suddenly burst into laughter, realizing it was very likely that Christine had told Barton about the acting method. Then he sighed inwardly. The wheel of fate rolls on, and in the blink of an eye, I am already a legal assistant. On the way home in the carriage, Hobert eagerly opened the documents and began to read. As Barton said, this case was simple. Mr. Robin, the defendant, borrowed £200 in cash from his friend, Mr. Henry, for an investment, but Mr. Robin's investment failed, reportedly losing everything. Mr. Henry, in urgent need of money recently, had no choice but to sue his former good friend, Mr. Robin, after failing to collect the debt. Mr. Henry had a promissory note and witnesses, with ample evidence, meaning the case could be concluded almost as soon as the court session began. Although it was just a formality, Hobert still took his first court appearance seriously, mentally rehearsing a fierce debate with Mr. Robin in court, culminating in his request to the judge for compulsory enforcement, and Mr. Robin's ultimate defeat. During dinner, Christine had the maid pour Hobert a glass of wine. You're starting your official work tomorrow. This is an important step in life, so have a drink to celebrate. Hobert didn't refuse, and after a few sips, he gradually became more talkative. Donna, even if I'm not watching over you at school anymore, you're not allowed to date. Those boys are still too immature. Donna pouted and said, I don't need you to look after me, and besides, there are many very mature and stable, or very humorous and talkative boys. Hobert took a sip of wine and said, No, 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 you don't know. I'm a boy, I understand what they're thinking better. Although Hobert had some estrangement from this family, both the original owner and the current Hobert tried their best to fulfill a brother's responsibility. Especially since Hobert was one grade higher than Donna, no matter where they went to school, he naturally felt a protective instinct towards Donna. Christine chuckled and said, Listen to Hobert on this matter. Donna stuck out her tongue inelegantly, as if she had heard Hobert's words, but whether she would act on them was another matter. After dinner, Hobert returned to his room and took out the documents to read them several more times, imagining all sorts of possibilities and contingencies, not even going to the country of disorder to continue his exploration. However, everything that happened in the magistrate's court the next day still far exceeded Hobert's expectations. Hobert still took the family's four-wheeled carriage to work. The carriage first dropped Donna and Tyrone off at school, then headed straight for the magistrate's court. There were many magistrates' courts in Backland, and the one handling this case was the magistrate's court in Jowood district. Although the magistrate's court had two large windows, the lighting was still not very good, and besides the judge's bench, the plaintiff's stand, and the defendant's stand, there was only a small public gallery with 2 rows of crude wooden benches. Today's defendant, Mr. Robin, did not default on his debt as Hobert had imagined. He wore a worn-out coat and a patched hat. To show respect for the court, Mr. Robin took off his hat and held it in his hand, pleading, Your Honor, lawyer, please give me 1 month. I will definitely repay the money after 1 month. Or let me pay in installments, £2 a week, no, £3 is also fine. Please don't sell my house. I don't want to lose my family, and I don't want our family to move to the East District or Bridge District. This was unforeseen by Hobert. When looking at the material, he unconsciously sided with the plaintiff, always imagining the defendant as a villain, but Mr. Robin clearly had no intention of defaulting, and he also had his own difficulties. Hobert flipped through the material again. Mr. Robin's only asset was his small house. He tried his best to suppress his sympathy. Mr. Robin, I deeply sympathize with your situation, but if your house is not auctioned to repay the debt, my client's family will go bankrupt. Are we to let their family move to the East District or Bridge District? Mr. Robin was speechless, looking at his former good friend with some shame. Mr. Henry also clearly felt some reluctance, but he still said nothing. Just as Hobert said, if he softened, his whole family would suffer. Hobert continued, Mr. Robin, I saw in the material that you have a stable job with a weekly salary of around £3, and a house inherited from your father, so you don't have to pay rent. An income of £3 is enough for your family to live a life close to middle class. Why did you insist on taking risks with investments? You are an adult, and since you chose to invest, you must be responsible for your choice. I suggest you rent a house in the East District, work hard, and you might be able to buy back the auctioned house in a few years. He concluded, Your Honor, I request compulsory enforcement. The judge had long been impatient, and he immediately granted Hobert's request. After the defendant's assets are auctioned, the court will receive no less than 10% in handling fees, which is the main source of income for the magistrate's court. In civil economic cases in the ruined kingdom's magistrate's court, compulsory enforcement judgments account for a very high proportion, leading to the bankruptcy of many middle-class families. After Mr. Henry and Mr. Robin's case concluded, Hobert was distraught. He sat in the public gallery for more than 10 minutes before leaving to take a public carriage back to the Oslon Barton law firm. Hobert first went to report the case's outcome to Barton. Barton, sitting in a leather chair, looked at Hobert. You look very tired. Hobert said with a bitter smile, I just suddenly realized that I live in such a cold world. He had previously only lived in the small world of Backland's upper class. He had forgotten that this was ruin. This was Backland, an era of primitive accumulation of capital. What do you take us for? Barton took a sip of coffee. We are a pack of wolves in backland. When we see a sheep, we take a bite. Hobert was stunned. Is this what a lawyer is? Barton smiled. If you think a lawyer is a vanguard of justice, then you are greatly mistaken, but if you have no justice in your heart, then you are definitely not a good lawyer. He said, you should go back and rest today. Come early tomorrow morning and come with me to handle an economic dispute commissioned by Earl Hall. Hobert nodded. Okay. On the carriage ride back, Hobert gradually understood some issues. He shouldn't define the personalities of the plaintiff and defendant so early. His client couldn't be entirely on the side of justice, and some clients might not even be on the side of justice. But as a lawyer, he still had to fight for and protect his client's interests. This was the court, however. Outside the court, he could do his best to help those who deserved help. During dinner, Hobert asked the maid for a glass of wine and said to his adoptive parents, Father, Mother, thank you for protecting me in the past. Today, I only realized what the world is like without your protection. Christine patted Hobert's shoulder with relief. Time really flies. In the blink of an eye, you've grown up. Monliza was so touched by Hobert's sudden gratitude that she almost shed tears. On Thursday morning, Hobert accompanied Mr. Barton in the law firm's carriage to the residence of Lord Hall. In the carriage, Mr. Barton introduced, Lord Hall is a nobleman with far-reaching vision and a wise mind. While most lords were still squandering their land and family fortunes, Lord Hall was already actively investing in banking and emerging industries. Hobert nodded. Justice's father, he still had some impression of him. Mr. Barton sighed. The reforms in the ruined kingdom over the years have been like a sieve. A group of nobles took advantage of this opportunity to gain more wealth and political status, while most nobles declined. However, nobles value their dignity very much. Even if there are disputes among them, their first thought is to resolve them privately. If it truly goes to court, it means both sides have completely torn off all pretense, disregarding their noble dignity for the sake of wealth and assets. Mr. Barton was deeply trusted by Lord Hall. The Lord would generally ask Mr. Barton to help review contracts for important transactions or collaborations, and would also listen to Mr. Barton's opinions when encountering economic disputes. Hobert had previously seen Lord Hall's mansion from a distance, and it didn't seem particularly impressive from the outside. But upon entering, Hobert realized that the Lord's mansion was much larger than he had imagined. Upon entering, there was a huge garden with sculptures, fountains, vast lawns, and manicured landscape trees. Lawns were a symbol of nobility in this era. Ordinary families would not plant grass because it yielded no income and required effort to maintain. Only nobles, who did not rely on these lands for their livelihood, would choose to plant grass. Gradually, lawns became a symbol of nobility and wealth. Hobert and Mr. Barton arrived by carriage in front of a 3-story, very imposing European-style building, where Lord Hall's butler was already waiting at the door. The butler politely exchanged greetings with Mr. Barton, and did not forget to praise Hobert's handsome appearance. Then, Mr. Barton and Hobert entered under the butler's guidance. Upon entering, there was a magnificent hall with many artists' works hanging on the walls, and most of the furnishings were priceless antiques. Lord Hall was waiting at the entrance of a reception room. Although years had left clear marks on the Lord, he was still very handsome. One could imagine that in his youth, he must have been a nobleman who charmed many young ladies. Mr. Barton, you always look so well. Lord Hall smiled. Is this your new assistant? Your complexion is also like the morning sun, making one feel warm. Mr. Barton exchanged pleasantries. Yes, Lord, he is a top student from Backland University, a very good young man. Lord Hall observed Hobert. Black hair, dark eyes, handsome features, especially a sunny and cheerful smile, like a young man visiting from next door. It's only when I see these excellent young people that I feel truly old. Lord Hall sighed. Please come in. Father. A crisp shout made the three of them stop and look in the direction of the voice. Hobert saw an unparalleled beauty elegantly walking towards him. She had golden hair and green eyes, her long hair shining like gold, her temperament pure and elegant, and her emerald eyes like the purest gems. Hobert couldn't help but stare. utterly captivated. This was undoubtedly the most beautiful young lady he had ever seen in both his lives. Mr. Barton cleared his throat, bringing Hobert back to his senses. He said with a bit of embarrassment, "My apologies, Lord, and to this beautiful young lady, your beauty has stunned me." Lord Hall smiled. "There's nothing to apologize for. The pursuit of beauty is a gentleman's cultivation." The Lord saw no infatuation or impropriety in Hobert's eyes, only pure shock and appreciation for beauty. Such self-control was rare among young people, and the fact that he apologized so gracefully made Lord Hall appreciate this young man even more. This incomparably beautiful young lady was, naturally, Miss Audrey, Justice. Hobert sighed. No wonder, Kay was somewhat flustered when he first saw Audrey, even suspecting she might be a witch. She was indeed excessively beautiful. The Lord asked Audrey, who had walked closer, "My beautiful daughter, is there something you need me for?" "Hello, Mr. Barton." Her good upbringing led Audrey to first greet Mr. Barton warmly, and she didn't forget to give Hobert a gentle smile. Then she said to Lord Hall, "Father, after you finish your important business, may I ask Mr. Barton a few questions alone?" "Of course, you may," Lord Hall said with a doting expression. Mr. Barton also said, "Beautiful young lady, it is my honor." He said, "Please allow me to introduce my assistant, Hobert. He is a law student from Backland University. If you wish to inquire about legal knowledge, I think Hobert can be of service to you." The Lord smiled. "It seems you have high expectations for this young man." Mr. Barton nodded, "Yes." Hearing their conversation, Hobert was slightly taken aback. He probably understood that Mr. Barton was recommending him to the Lord's next generation. In the Rouen legal community, it was common for senior lawyers to recommend students or assistants they believed had great potential to their main clients, or the descendants of their main clients. This was somewhat like the meaning of a closed-door disciple. But the problem was, Hobert believed that once he digested the potion, he might leave the law firm. Why would Mr. Barton cultivate him in this way? However, this was not the time to ponder that. Hobert bowed slightly to Audrey and said, "Gladly at your service." Audrey was clearly somewhat distrustful of Hobert, but out of respect for Mr. Barton, she said, "Very well then, Mr. Hobert, please follow me." Watching the two young people leave, Lord Hall smiled. "I also need to consider finding a young person to be my assistant." He sighed. "Youth is truly wonderful. It always makes one feel full of vitality. I feel full of strength now." Mr. Barton smiled. "Then let's begin our work." The two entered the reception room while talking. On the other side, Audrey led Hobert to the garden, though even the most beautiful flowers here seemed to pale in comparison to Audrey. Audrey walked ahead and asked, "Mr. Hobert, have you handled criminal cases before?" Hobert was momentarily stunned. He couldn't very well say he had only handled one case in total. "I have reviewed many relevant cases and can help you analyze and offer suggestions. If it needs to be resolved in court, Mr. Barton can represent you." Audrey frowned slightly before continuing, "I have a friend. In a conflict, she accidentally crippled her opponent." Hobert thought to himself, "Miss Justice, could that friend of yours be Zio?" Chapter 13. Zio Derecha. Hobert remembered that Furs Wall, a future member of the Tarot Club, had indeed sought Audrey's help to rescue Zio Derecha. Audrey continued, "According to my understanding, my friend is very willing to help the weak seek justice, and the person she injured is a villain from the East Borough, so I want to help my friend get acquitted." She said, "Mr. Hobert, I believe you will also stand on the side of justice and give me the most reasonable advice." Hobert pondered for a moment before saying, "Miss Hall, perhaps what I'm about to say will make you uncomfortable, but that is my understanding of justice." He unconsciously emphasized the word, justice, and then pointed to the gardener in the distance. "Miss Audrey, I imagine your requirement for a gardener is that he can plant various flowers and plants and knows how to fertilize them." Then he pointed to the personal maid following behind them. "I imagine your requirement for a servant is that she is clever, cautious, and can assist you in your daily life." Audrey didn't quite understand what Hobert ultimately wanted to express, but she nodded in agreement. Hobert then said, but your requirement for all their actions will not be that they are just, or that they always stand on the side of justice. Audrey was stunned, realizing that Hobert made a lot of sense. For a gardener and a servant, only the most basic moral requirements are needed. No one hiring a gardener would demand that his character be just. So you also don't need to demand that I must be just, because for me, being a lawyer is a job like that of a gardener or a servant. Regardless of whether your request is just or not, I will give you the best advice and assistance within my capabilities, Hobert said. Because absolute justice may not exist in this world. Perhaps some things you consider just, others may view as evil or annoying. Although I haven't been in the legal profession for long, I have already given up hope for absolute justice. If you ever hear that I defend someone for free, it must be help given out of my conscience, and has nothing to do with justice. These were Hobert's insights from last night. Although they didn't seem to help much in summarizing lawyers' rules, they seemed helpful for being a good lawyer. Perhaps out of trust in a tarot club member, and certainly with a desire to show off, Hobert shared his understanding of justice with Miss Justice. Audrey was greatly surprised to hear these words, "You are a knowledgeable gentleman." The two had now arrived at a secluded spot in the garden, where a round table and 2 chairs had been set up in advance, with drinks and pastries on the table. Audrey invited Hobert to sit down, and her maid asked Hobert, "Would you prefer coffee or black tea?" "Black tea, thank you." Hobert began to analyze the case for Audrey. There are 2 ways to help your friend get acquitted. One way is to have your friend provide a certificate of mental illness, and the other way is to have the injured person withdraw the lawsuit. Although the first method is simpler, I lean towards the latter, because if your friend has a mental illness certificate, it will add a lot of inconvenience to her future life. While speaking, he kept feeling someone staring at him from behind. After he finished speaking, he looked behind him, but there was no one, only a golden retriever. Wait. Could that be Susie? Hobert opened his spiritual vision and found that the dog's weakness was its eyes. He was even more certain that it was Susie, because the most important part of an audience is their eyes. Without sight, they would lose most of their abilities. Audrey obviously noticed Hobert's abnormality, and she quickly asked, "How exactly should we do it?" Hobert also pretended that his attention had been drawn back and said, "I need to meet your friend in person, and then go talk to the person she injured. It would be best if we could pay some money to make him withdraw the lawsuit." He said, "Miss Audrey, you can entrust this matter to me. Tomorrow, I will go talk to them, and if luck is on our side, this matter can be resolved perfectly in a day or 2. Through their conversation just now, Audrey had already established initial trust in Hobert. "I am very happy to entrust this matter to you. Thank you for your trust. How much are you willing to spend at most to resolve this matter?" £600, no more, because the injured person really is a villain, Audrey said. Hobert smiled and said, "No problem. You can send someone you trust to assist me in resolving this matter." Although he said, "assist," it was actually to report the entire process of Hobert solving the problem truthfully to Audrey. Audrey nodded. "Okay." After discussing the case, the two began to chat. Hobert shared some interesting stories from his university campus, making Audrey, who had always been educated at home, yearn for university life. It wasn't until nearly noon that Barton's negotiation with Earl Hall concluded. In the carriage on the way back, Barton asked Hobert about the general content of his conversation with Audrey, and finally said, "Your handling was very good. This is an opportunity for you. You should know that Earl Hall dotes on this daughter very much and will likely give her no less than £300,000 in property. In the future, when this beautiful young lady marries, this will be a generous dowry. As long as you gain her trust, you will have a steady stream of business coming your way." £300,000. Hobert thought about his £15 of pocket money and suddenly felt like he didn't want to work hard anymore. He wondered if Earl Hall was looking for a live-in son-in-law. Then he shook his head. Nobles value matching family backgrounds and propriety very much. He probably wouldn't be competitive even if he tried to be a live-in son-in-law. It was better to give up on that idea. The next morning, Audrey sent a butler's assistant to assist Hobert in resolving Zio's problem. Generally speaking, the position of a butler's assistant in a noble household is a very promising career. For example, in Earl Hall's household, there are several butler's assistants, 3 of whom were responsible for the lives of Earl Hall's 3 children and assisting them in managing their respective careers or properties. In the future, after Earl Hall passes away, or after his children marry, these 3 butler's assistants will, barring any unforeseen circumstances, become the official butlers for Audrey and her 2 older brothers. So the person Audrey sent was a lady in her 30s named Lisa. She was dressed appropriately and had a serious demeanor. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Hobert invited Lisa to join him in the firm's 2-wheeled carriage, and the 2 headed straight for Minsk prison. Backland has a total of 3 prisons, 2 built on the outskirts of the city, and 1 built within the city. Because it is located on Minsk Street, it is called Minsk Prison by everyone. In Hobert's understanding, Minsk Prison was more like a detention center, where prisoners awaiting interrogation or trial were usually held. Hobert had prepared the relevant documents yesterday. After presenting the documents to the prison guard, he quickly got the opportunity to visit Zio. After waiting for a while in the visiting room, the door was opened again, and the prison guard brought in a short girl with some baby fat on her face. Her features were delicate and soft, but her brows and eyes seemed not yet fully developed, even appearing a bit immature. Based on her height of less than 1.5 meters, Hobert could confirm that this was Zio Derecha. Hobert resisted the urge to pat her head. Her height and appearance were just too suitable for patting heads. "Miss Hugh, your friend Miss Hall asked me to help you out of your current predicament. Last night, Furs had already used her apprentice ability to go to the prison and tell her about asking Miss Hall and the young Viscount Glaint for help. Hugh politely said, 'Please thank Miss Hall for me. How can I cooperate with you? This little girl is quite sensible.' Hobert smiled and said, 'I need to know the entire process of the conflict.' 'Okay.' Hugh recounted, 'Mr. Bennett is an honest worker from the East District. He was quite wealthy more than 10 years ago, but a business failure led to his family's bankruptcy. But even in his most difficult times, he still carefully protected the pocket watch his father inherited to him. Just half a month ago, when Mr. Bennett got off work, he found his pocket watch stolen. Fortunately, the thief had not gone far at the time. Bennett saw the thief's face and knew that it was Ville's subordinate. Do you two know the relationship between the thieves and bullies in the East District?' Hobert said, 'I generally know. Some thugs force or instigate children in the East District to steal.' Hugh nodded, 'That's right. So my arbitration was that the 7 or 8-year-old thief was not at fault. Ville had to hand over the pocket watch and compensate Bennett 3 sous for his lost work time. But Ville did not obey my arbitration, so I had no choice but to resort to physical persuasion.' 'What the hell is physical persuasion?' Hobert thought to himself, 'Isn't it just beating the other party into submission?' 'I swear,' Hugh said, 'I only wanted to break one of his legs at the time. It was he himself who accidentally bumped into the table and reportedly broke his lumbar spine.' She spread her hands. 'This is the whole story.' Hobert nodded. 'I understand.' Lisa, who had not interrupted the entire time, now asked weakly, 'Is that scoundrel named Ville so fragile? Or was he ill? Otherwise, how could such a small girl possibly beat an adult man?' Hugh opened her mouth, not knowing how to explain for a moment. 'Ms. Lisa, please allow me to introduce you. The lady is wearing a knight's training uniform.' Hobert winked at Hugh. 'As far as I know, she has received strict knight training. Let alone one scoundrel, I estimate 2 or 3 adult men are no match for her.' Hugh quickly nodded. 'Yes, yes, yes.' She guessed that Hobert should also be a beander, or at least aware of the existence of beanders, which is why Miss Hall asked him for help and told him the fact that she was a beander. Lisa was a little surprised and was already considering whether to let her daughter also receive knight training. Hobert then asked, 'Where can I find Mr. Ville? I don't know where he lives, but at the Blue Knight Bar, his subordinates must be there.' Hugh said. Hobert stood up and said, 'Okay, Miss Hugh, please bear with it. I will solve the problem as soon as possible. Thank you. Hugh politely shook Hobert's hand. Hobert had the illusion of shaking hands with a middle school student, and, sorry, it's not that I want to look down on you, but only this way can I make eye contact with you. Leaving Minsk prison, the carriage went straight to the East District. In the carriage, Hobert asked, Ms. Lisa, have you been to the East District? A few times. Lisa returned to her unsmiling state. I've recruited maids there. Hobert sighed. I've heard countless stories about the East District from others, but this is my first time going there. He asked, what are your thoughts on the East District? It feels like they don't live in the same world as us. Silence fell in the carriage. After a few minutes, Hobert said, you are very right. At this time, the carriage had already arrived in the East District. Today was Friday, a workday, but homeless people with numb eyes and expressions could still be seen on the streets. There were also children with only big heads left, running on the streets, staring at Hobert and their carriage with shifty eyes. Hobert looked at those children and lamented, they should be in school, living a life of comfort, instead of mingling in bars frequented by thugs, doing petty thievery. Then, he didn't know if he was explaining to Lisa or talking to himself. I know I can't help them now. I just feel that their lives shouldn't be like this. Haha, why don't they eat meat? My words really sound hateful. Lisa didn't quite understand Hobert's words, but she felt that the young man beside her was a little off. Of course he was off. Hobert hadn't felt much when he read descriptions of the East District in books before. He was born and grew up in a peaceful country, and after transmigrating, he also lived in an upper-class family. It was hard for him to empathize with the people of the East District. Only after coming to the East District did he truly understand what numbness meant, and what it meant to be, as thin as a matchstick. Hobert sighed for a moment, then quickly adjusted his emotions. As he said, he couldn't do anything now. The sympathy he showed at this moment was meaningless and would only ruin his plan. Arriving at the Blue Night Bar, it was another scene altogether. It was extraordinarily lively, filled with the smell of sweat and foot odor. Too many people hoped to numb themselves with alcohol and escape this damned life. Of course, this was also a small black market. Thieves would fence stolen goods here, and thugs would conduct illegal transactions or collaborations. Hobert stood at the bar, took out a £1 banknote. Whoever can take me to Seville, this £1 is his. The noisy bar suddenly fell silent. It should be known that most workers in the East District had a weekly wage of around 15 soul or even 10 soul. £1 was a considerable sum of money here. A young man came forward with a chuckle. I'll tell you where Ville is. Hobert said coldly, you need to take me there. Okay, no problem, give me the money quickly, young master. The other party laughed after getting the money. Now let me tell you, Ville is dead, do I have to take you to hell? Ha 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 ha. The people in the bar also started laughing. Hobert unhurriedly opened his coat, revealing the revolver at his waist. My gun doesn't seem to be satisfied with your answer. He had anticipated that he might come to the East District today, so he specifically applied for a revolver. As for his marksmanship, how should I put it? Not firing the gun is when it has the greatest power. This revolver once again silenced the bar. The young man couldn't laugh anymore. Okay, young master, I'll take you there now. With the deterrence of the handgun, the young man dared not play tricks anymore. He turned left and right, and finally, in front of a dilapidated door, the young man knocked on the door. Boss Ville, are you still alive? A rough voice came from inside the door. Which bastard wants to steal my things again? Ever since he couldn't stand up, no one treated him as a boss anymore. Opening the door to Ville's house, a foul stench assailed them, and Lisa quickly pulled out a handkerchief to cover her nose. One could imagine the miserable state of a person with paralyzed lower limbs, left unattended. Hobert waved his hand in front of his nose, stepped through the door, and found that there were no valuable items left in the room. They had clearly been stolen. A man in his 40s lay on the bed, his face covered in stubble, looking disheveled. This was Ville after his injury. Moldy food and empty wine bottles were strewn haphazardly on the floor, and Vil, clutching a bottle of wine, stared at Hobert with bloodshot eyes. Who are you? What do you want? Who I am isn't important, Hobert said, opening a window for ventilation. Where are your parents? Vil sneered, they died long ago. What about your wife? That bitch ran off long ago. And she took all his savings from those years. Hobert said, allow me to boldly speculate that in your current condition, you won't live more than half a month. Vil stared at Hobert. What do you want to do? I don't remember offending you. Or I could give you some money to hire a maid to take care of you for a while, until you get used to life as a paralytic, Hobert coaxed. Vil was incredulous at first, then seemed to understand something. What do you need me to do? Hobert didn't beat around the bush. Drop the charges against Hugh. Vil said fiercely, that's impossible. She caused me to lose my legs, let her spend her life in prison. You didn't die on the spot, Hobert said. This can only be considered intentional injury. With me defending her, she'll be out of prison in 3 or 4 years at most. Oh, goddess, look at the world today. Vil drunkenly yelled, the murderer who paralyzed me hasn't received the punishment she deserves at all. Hobert waved his hand in annoyance. All right, the fact that you're still alive in this world is the goddess's greatest tolerance. Let's talk business. I'll give you £300, and you withdraw the lawsuit. Otherwise, in half a month, I'll come to collect your corpse. Hobert had been clumsily using his distortion ability, hoping to distort Vil's thoughts. But Vil, breathing heavily, stared at Hobert, and after a long while, said, I want £3,000. Hobert was somewhat disappointed. Clearly, his distortion ability hadn't had much effect. The young man who had brought Hobert earlier had been watching the commotion outside, and when he heard Vil's offer, his jaw nearly dropped. I will agree to your terms, Hobert smiled. Then, after you withdraw the lawsuit, I'll spend £100 to have someone kill you. Looking at Hobert's hearty smile, Vil was somewhat terrified. Hobert said, brother, your asking price is too high. Then it's £2,000, no lower. Hobert still shook his head. Vil sneered, anyway, I'm a worthless life now, young lawyer. Please come collect my corpse in half a month, but also tell that bastard arbitrator to prepare for prison. Hobert pondered for a moment, then let's change the condition. I'll help you find a doctor to get you back on your feet, and then you withdraw the lawsuit. Vil was initially excited, then he shook his head dejectedly. I've seen many doctors, and they all said I can't stand up again. Hobert continued to use his distortion ability to influence Vil's thoughts, and he said coldly, with all due respect, what kind of good doctor could you possibly afford? Vil was stunned, as if something suddenly clicked. That's right, what kind of good doctor could a hoodlum from the East District find? The doctors he saw at the hospital in Jowood District, where he was carried to before, were the best he had ever seen. So he rekindled his hope, if you cure me, and then give me £300. Hobert interrupted him, you can only choose one, money or treatment. My patience is limited. If you continue to act shamelessly, you will get nothing. He was a little excited inside, because his influence had some effect. All right, I choose to be cured. Vil said, but I won't withdraw the lawsuit until there's a clear improvement. Hobert nodded and said to the young man peeking in from outside, what's your name? Pete, sir, my name is Pete. Hobert then took out a £1 banknote. All right, Pete, are you willing to run errands for me today? If so, you'll also earn £1. Pete immediately entered, reaching out to take the banknote. Of course I'm willing. Hobert, however, put the money away. I'll give it to you after your work is done. Now, go find 4 homeless people and tell them I'm hiring them for 1 day today, and I'll pay each of them 6 soul. Happy to serve. Pete turned and left. He quickly found 4 homeless people, and Hobert then had Pete rent a carriage, then had the homeless people carry Vil to a nearby bathhouse to bathe, and also found someone to shave and cut Vil's hair. When they emerged from the bathhouse, Vil, carried by the homeless men, looked at least 10 years younger. It was already noon, so Hobert found a nearby cafe for lunch and invited the 4 homeless people to join them. The 4 homeless people were deeply grateful to Hobert, 2 of them even shed tears, as they hadn't had a proper meal in a long time. Hobert kept reminding them to eat slowly, which prevented them from choking on their food. The food here was very greasy, but Hobert still ate it all. After a stroll around the East District, he felt that any waste of food was shameful. However, Lisa seemed to have no appetite, and her ordered lunch was almost untouched. With Lisa's permission, Hobert shared her lunch with the 4 homeless people. After lunch, Hobert said to the coachman, to Riverbend Avenue in the South Bridge District. The coachman asked, "Sir, what's the exact number? I forgot to. Once we get to Riverbend Avenue, I'll get out and ask for directions." Hobert was telling the truth. The address of the Vampire White family had only appeared a few times, and he was grateful to even remember it was on Riverbend Avenue. After the carriage started moving, in the 2-wheeled carriage leading the way, Lisa asked with some concern, "Mr. Hobert, although I'm not a doctor, I can tell Vil is seriously injured. Are you confident you can cure him?" Hobert smiled. "Whether I'm confident or not doesn't matter what I say, it matters what the doctor says." He said, "However, the doctor I know is very special and highly skilled. If he says he can't cure him, then Vil is truly beyond help." Lisa did not continue the topic, and silence returned to the carriage. Upon reaching Riverbend Avenue, most of the residents here were middle-class families. Walking on these streets, one felt as if they had returned to civilization. Hobert got out and asked a passerby, and quickly got the address of Dr. White, who was skilled in bloodletting therapy, 48 Riverbend Avenue. Knocking on the door of number 48, a young man opened the door for everyone. "Who are you looking for?" Hobert asked. "We've come to see Dr. White." "Are you Dr. White?" "No, I'm his son, Emlyn White." The young man in front of him had black hair and red eyes, with his hair combed back diagonally, giving him a casual air amidst his seriousness. He looked about 27 or 28 years old, handsome, slightly effeminate, with undisguised arrogance in his eyes. He was Emlyn White, the vampire who later joined the Tarot Club. Emlyn said, "I'm sorry, my father just went out. Please come back another day." Hobert smiled. "I heard someone mention before that Dr. White's son also has very superb medical skills. We traveled a long way to get here, please treat my friend." Emlyn hesitated for a moment before saying, "Please come in." 4 vagrants carried Vil onto a bed in the clinic. As Emlyn examined Vil, he asked casually, "You don't seem to be residents from nearby." In Hobert's impression, Emlyn was somewhat carefree, but now it seemed this Mr. Vampire was quite cautious, even knowing to ask about the background of unfamiliar patients. "Yes, I was introduced by Mr. Moriarty." Hobert said shamelessly. Mr. Moriarty once suffered from severe liver disease, and doctors had almost given him a death sentence. Through a friend on Riverbend Avenue, he found Dr. White, and after only 3 doses of medicine, Mr. Moriarty's condition miraculously improved. Emlyn, hearing that the patient was introduced by his father's client, diagnosed, "His lumbar spine is broken. I happen to have a potion here that can regrow bones, but it will be very painful." He explained, "Both my father and I specialize in treating internal diseases. Your friend is lucky, I just read about a bone regeneration potion in a book 2 days ago." Hobert thought, is it really such a coincidence? Or is this just the vampire doctor's excuse? He said, "That's great, please start the treatment now. The potion costs £30. Emlyn explained, "There's a very precious ingredient, so of course the price is also very high." It seemed he also used a small amount of low-sequence extraordinary materials. Hobert didn't even think twice before counting out the banknotes. "Please begin." Fortunately, he had borrowed £50 in cash from the office that morning, otherwise it wouldn't have been enough for today's expenses. Lisa, who had come in with them, hesitated to speak, clearly wanting to remind the young man, "What kind of medicine costs £30? You must have met a scammer, right?" Even Vil, lying on the bed, felt it was too expensive, but then he remembered it wasn't his own money, so he said nothing. Emlyn began his bloodletting therapy, making a shallow incision on Ville's arm. As he collected the blood, he said, "The fluid in each human body is limited. If some blood is not released beforehand, the potion I prepare will be difficult to absorb." It sounded very reasonable, but if Hobert hadn't seen him imperceptibly lick his lips with his tongue when he saw the fresh blood, he would have almost believed his nonsense. It really was nonsense. After collecting about 200 milliliters of blood, Emlyn went to the compounding room, prepared the potion, and had Ville drink it in one gulp. Then Emlyn, as if performing bone setting, reset Ville's lumbar spine. This process made Ville scream in pain, and when Emlyn's bone setting was over, Ville screamed even more miserably, "Did you give me poison? You want to kill me to silence me, right?" Emlyn said, "The bone has started to regrow. I told you before, this process will be very painful." Hobert, however, simply ignored Ville's wailing and chatted leisurely with Emlyn about interesting things in Southbridge district. After Ville screamed in despair for more than 10 minutes, the pain began to subside. Then he discovered that he could miraculously sit up. Pete and Lisa, who were beside him, could hardly believe their eyes and began to praise the goddess, calling it a miracle. Emlyn's proud expression became even more obvious. "All right, he will be mostly recovered in at most 1 or 2 hours." Hobert also had to exclaim, "Your medical skills are truly superb. Those 30 pounds were really worth it." With Emlyn's smug expression, Hobert had the vagrants carry Ville back to the carriage, and they returned to the East District together. On the way back, Lisa was still saying, "Goddess, it's truly incredible, Mr. Hobert, I never thought Backland had such an amazing doctor." Hobert smiled meaningfully. "In Backland, anything, no matter how incredible, can happen." Lisa asked strangely, "But if that young doctor and his father have such good medical skills, why don't they have any fame?" "Because they don't want to be too ostentatious," Hobert thought. "If I hadn't had Mr. Moriarty open for business early and told Emlyn it was business introduced by an acquaintance, Emlyn definitely wouldn't have treated Ville." Though he thought this, Hobert said, "As far as I know, their family doesn't like to be disturbed by too many people, so please, Miss Lisa, don't spread the word about today's events." Lisa sighed, "That's a pity." Back in the East District, Hobert first paid each vagrant 6 Sul as compensation. The vagrants were "Thank you so much." With this money they could have 2 full meals and then find a cheap hotel to rest, which would give them a chance to find work. Once they had a job, they could rent a sleeping space for 10 pence or 1 Sul a week, and thus bid farewell to their life as vagrants. Pete stepped forward and said, "Sir, where's my payment?" "I'll give it to you later," Hobert said, "lest you catch up with those 4 vagrants and extort them." Pete gave an awkward laugh. He actually had that thought. Hobert said to Ville, "It's only 2:30 in the afternoon, we still have time to withdraw the lawsuit." Ville, who was almost fully recovered, respectfully said, "Okay, sir." Ville, standing again, felt reborn. At the same time, he was completely convinced by Hobert and unconsciously became respectful. Hobert and his group completed the withdrawal of the lawsuit around 4 o'clock, and the matter was thus perfectly resolved. Lisa, upon returning to Earl's mansion, still found everything that had happened that day somewhat incredible. After dinner with the Earl's family, Audrey finally had time to hear Lisa's report. Earl Hall and the Countess were also present. They had nothing else to do after dinner, so they sat nearby and listened together. Audrey asked, "How was it, Lisa? Did you see my friend and the injured person?" "Oh, beautiful miss, the progress of the matter far exceeded our expectations," Lisa said. "Miss Hugh will be released tomorrow." Audrey was stunned. So the injured person wasn't hurt by Miss Hugh? Of course she was. "It's hard to imagine how such a small girl could injure an adult male," Lisa said. "It was our lawyer, he showed highly efficient action and extensive, valuable connections." Before the Count and Countess Hall and Audrey, Ms. Lisa began to recount Hobert's excellent initiative today, as well as that miraculous potion. When Audrey heard about that miraculous doctor, she suspected it was a beander. Since Hobert knew such a beander doctor, could he also be a beander? It was a pity that she had too little extraordinary knowledge to make a correct judgment, but the Tarot Club was in 3 days, so she could wait until the Tarot Club to consult Mr. Emperor. This gentleman knew a lot, and the key was that he was easy to get along with. After listening to Lisa's narration, Count Hall smiled. This is a reliable young gentleman, very good at seizing opportunities. He said to Audrey, "My dear, if you have any legal problems in the future, you can listen to his advice." "Father, that's exactly what I was thinking," Audrey smiled. "But before that, I need to pay Aslan Barton a satisfactory fee." "Father, is there any way to give Mr. Hobert more tips? I think he deserves it." Count Hall smiled. "Besides the fee paid to the law firm, you can designate a sum of money to cover the law firm's expenses in this case. Usually, after deducting expenses, the law firm will give the remaining money to the lawyer in charge of the case. Normally, these matters were handled by the butler. Count Hall would at most just give an order to tip a certain lawyer. Today, in order to make his daughter understand the unspoken rules of backland society, the dignified Count Hall would inquire about such a meager expenditure of a few £100. On Saturday morning, Hobert accompanied Lisa to complete Miss Hugh's release procedures from prison. When Hugh walked out of prison, she still found it incredible. "Mr. Hobert, it's truly unimaginable that you solved the matter in just 1 day." Hobert smiled. "Just good luck. I just happened to know a famous doctor who cured Ville's paralysis." He looked around the prison gate. "No friends came to pick you up?" Hugh smiled helplessly. "She probably hasn't gotten the news yet." Hobert said, "Then allow me to escort you back to your residence." Hugh immediately refused. "Thank you for your kindness, but I hope to take a walk in the sun." Her face looked a bit childish, making it easy for people to overlook that she had been struggling in backland for many years. She didn't have enough trust in Hobert yet, so of course, she couldn't let him know her residence. "All right then," Hobert thought to himself, "it seems I won't be able to see Miss Magician today." Hugh asked for Hobert's contact information. "If I encounter any legal difficulties in the future, I hope I can still get your help." Hobert nodded. "I look forward to your patronage." Watching Miss Hugh walk away with her short legs, Hobert and Lisa only then took a carriage back to the law firm. Lisa went directly to Barton's office. Hobert guessed it was to settle the payment for this case. It was almost noon when Lisa left. Barton called Hobert to his office. "Miss Audrey is a generous lady, she paid the law firm £200 in remuneration." Hobert immediately did some mental math. As a legal assistant, he could only get 10% of the remuneration, which was £20. This was a considerable income. For cases like Mr. Henry's and Mr. Robbins, which he handled in the magistrate's court earlier, he only received £3, leaving only £2.12 after tax. The weekly salary for a legal assistant was usually £6 to £9, but when Hobert came to work at the law firm, Barton advised him not to take a weekly salary but rather a commission, and Hobert followed the advice of this barrister. Legal assistants could receive 10% of the total remuneration. After becoming a senior assistant or a lawyer, they could receive 20% of the total remuneration. If one became a barrister, they would either become a new partner in the law firm or go out and open a new law firm themselves. Choosing a commission-based salary when first becoming a legal assistant was very uneconomical, because it was impossible to always encounter cases that were easy to solve. Sometimes it would take 2 weeks to earn £3 or £4. However, with Barton's support, the issue of income was no longer a problem at all. His recommendation alone earned Hobert £20. Barton saw the joy on Hobert's face and, with a mindset of watching a show, smiled. The generous Miss Audrey also paid the law firm £80 to cover all expenses in this case. According to custom, after deducting the £34.6 you spent, the remaining £45.13 will all become your tips. Hobert's mouth dropped open in surprise. This is a huge income. Hobert's reaction made Barton laugh heartily. This is backland, it has an ugly side, but also a beautiful side. He said, "Congratulations, young man, because of your excellent performance, you have earned over £60. You should know that many middle-class people are not as wealthy as you are now. After leaving Barton's office, Hobert was still somewhat excited. Is this backland? It can make a person penniless overnight, and it can also turn an ordinary person into a millionaire in the same amount of time. As he thought about it, Hobert gradually calmed down. He suddenly realized that such a society was actually very terrifying. When there were too many examples of overnight riches, it would inevitably make people always want to take shortcuts, always want to gamble, and bet all their assets on a certain investment. He recalled Mr. Robin, whom he had seen in court earlier. Mr. Robin's family had been doing quite well, but he had to invest with debt, ultimately leading to the bankruptcy of a happy family. The initial excitement of receiving a large sum of money gradually faded, and Hobert's mind gradually cleared. Although money was very useful, he could not get lost in the world of money. He still had many things to do: summarize the lawyer's code, further explore the country of disorder, find a way to completely lift the family curse, and figure out why he transmigrated and why he had such a close connection with the country of disorder. In this extraordinary world, strength is the only truth. Hobert lamented that he was almost blinded by money and began to summarize the gains from this period in his mind. The lawyer's code still had no sign, but he had a further understanding of the lawyer's ability. In Hobert's view, the lawyer's ability primarily consisted of two parts: finding weaknesses and distortion of thoughts. Finding weaknesses is a very useful beander ability. Generally, for sequence 9 and below, it is easy to find the opponent's weakness. Distortion of thoughts, however, was not as useful as imagined. According to Hobert's attempts these past few days, the main way to distort the opponent's thoughts relied on eloquence, and there was no way to obviously violate the opponent's thoughts. Hobert's use of his ability when communicating with Vil earlier was a good example. He could only influence Vil's thoughts by following Vil's thought process, and the distortion was not very significant. Of course, it might also be because the potion had not yet been digested. Hobert judged that if the judge potion were thoroughly digested, the ability to distort others' words and change their minds might be strengthened. But Hobert found that he was still too weak. He had the ability to discover an enemy's weakness but no method to attack it. This is sequence 9, merely possessing a slightly more incredible ability than ordinary people, but in terms of attack power and defense power, it is only slightly stronger than an ordinary person. Hobert decided to buy a cane after work today. Before, he had looked down on people who walked with canes even though their legs were fine. Now that he thought about it, wasn't a cane meant to be ready at all times to deal with sudden dangers? So, a cane is a weapon, always ready to crack someone's head open. What a load of nonsense about a gentleman's cane. Then there was the revolver. Hobert clearly remembered the power of the pistol in the Blue Night Bar. But his marksmanship. The most urgent next step is to find a place to practice his marksmanship. Only with a gun and a cane could Hobert calmly face some dangers, and even contend with beanders who were also sequence 9, he would have the ability to fight. Then he thought that Christine should know where to practice shooting, as he was a high-ranking officer. He would ask him at dinner. Around 3 p.m., Barton called Hobert into his office again and gave him 3 cases, which would be Hobert's main work for the next week. After explaining the work, Barton asked curiously, "How do you plan to spend the reward you just received?" Hobert smiled and said, "I want to buy Donna a dress, Tyrone a valuable fountain pen, and then get myself a gun license." A gun license? Hobert's answer clearly surprised Barton. "Yes, I think I might frequently go to the East District in the future. A gun has enough deterrent power in the East District and will save me a lot of trouble," Hobert said, half-truthfully. Barton nodded. "On Monday, have Bogle help you apply for the gun license. He's quite good at it." At the end of the conversation, Barton smiled and said, "Congratulations, young man, you have withstood the test of money. Young people with such self-control are rare now." Hobert smiled in response, but thought to himself, what kind of test is 60 or 70 Sul? If you gave me 600,000 Sul, I would immediately succumb to show you. After work, Hobert first went to the department store, spent 10 soul to buy a black wooden cane, and then spent £2 and 1 soul to buy a pocket watch engraved with the symbol of the Black Knight Goddess, and an ordinary watch chain. It wasn't that Hobert suddenly had a change of heart and started believing in the Black Knight Goddess again, but rather that these cheap pocket watches only came in a few popular styles, and the designs related to the Black Knight Goddess, the god of steam, and the god of storms looked more exquisite. As someone who had transmigrated from modern society, not knowing the time at all moments would make Hobert restless, which is why he reluctantly bought a pocket watch. Then, as he had said in the afternoon, Hobert bought a dress for his sister, a fountain pen for his brother, a silk scarf for his foster mother Monliza, and a pair of leather gloves for Christine. These purchases cost a total of £5 and 2 soul, making Hobert feel his heart bleed. Everyone in the family was very happy to receive Hobert's gifts. Donna said with a smile, "Hobert, you're rich now, so can you often treat me and brother to big meals outside?" Monliza, however, said seriously, "Don't think about asking Hobert for pocket money." Then she said to Hobert, "We've received your thoughtfulness, but don't spend your money recklessly in the future. You need to have your own savings." Hobert nodded, "I understand, mother." He then said to Donna, "If you two go to a museum or a bookstore, I'd be happy to pay for you. As for outside food, it's far worse than home cooking." After he started working, he ate out for lunch, which cost about 1 soul and 3 pence per meal, and the taste was truly nothing to write home about. Donna was a little disappointed. The dishes at the Intis restaurant are very good, and they have a very exotic flavor. Hobert suddenly remembered that the Intis restaurant in Backland seemed to be the property of Rosal the Great's daughter. He could go check it out when he had time, but not now. As dinner was nearing its end, Hobert asked Christine where he could practice shooting. Christine thought for a moment and said, "Tomorrow morning, I'll take you to join the mercenary club. They have a free shooting range, and you can get some very valuable news or opportunities there." Hobert had long heard of the mercenary club. It was a semi-official club, with many mercenary teams and retired soldiers as its members. According to Hobert, some tasks that were not suitable for the military to handle, such as reconnaissance, espionage, and assassination, would be issued as missions at the mercenary club for mercenaries to carry out. There were also some archaeological and commercial activities that were not protected by the military and carried certain risks, which would also be posted as missions at the mercenary club, requesting a team of mercenaries to protect the archaeological team or caravan. From Christine's words, it seemed the mercenary club also had mechanisms for information exchange and the like. After dinner, Hobert returned to his room, locked the door, and prepared to explore the country of disorder again. Fortunate, profound, yellow immortal venerable, the black tide reappeared before his eyes, and Hobert entered the country of disorder by walking backward. Through these past few days of exploration, he found that simply by sitting on the Iron Throne, he could grasp a certain power of order and distortion. For example, he could make a small chaotic area nearby become orderly. The originally chaotic state would transform into definite states like land, rocks, and so on. The power of distortion, on the other hand, was the exact opposite. It could make an orderly area chaotic, mixing land, rocks, flowers, and trees all together. However, Hobert was still unclear about how much influence the abilities of order and distortion had outside the country of disorder. So today, he planned to learn from Klein, design his own 3-part honorific name, and then pray to himself for power, to see if he could project the power of the country of order into the outside world. Thinking of this, Hobert couldn't help but smile. Klein was crossing the river by feeling for Rosal the Great, while he himself was crossing the river by feeling for Klein. Hobert sat upright on the Iron Throne, first thinking that he was now the master of the country of disorder, and that this source material was the necessary substance for the Black Emperor and Judge pathways to become an old one. His arrival in this world and his ability to only choose the Judge pathway should be the arrangement of destiny, or perhaps the arrangement of a god who held the authority of destiny. Since that was the case, his goal must be to become the Black Emperor, and the Black Emperor greatly valued the creation of human order. Thus, the first directional honorific name was established, the creator of human order. Although Hobert is only a sequence 9 now, he is already worrying about becoming a sequence 0 of the same pathway. The creator of human order has already exposed his ambition to become the Black Emperor. If the 7 gods were to examine Hobert's thoughts at this moment, they would definitely say that this kid knows too much, and then immediately crush him like an ant. Unfortunately, the 7 gods probably don't even know who Hobert is. Hobert continued to design his honorific name, and the second sentence needed a more specific direction. He caressed the armrest of the Iron Throne, and a new idea came to him: "You are the master of the country of disorder." Directly pointing to the master of the country of disorder, this is specific enough. There was also a third sentence. Hobert saw the clock tower in the sky, which reminded him of Backland's famous order clock. Got it. You are the master of the order clock. Although Hobert doesn't know what the inside of the clock tower looks like now, as his strength increases in the future, he will eventually be able to go in and see. The 3-part honorific name, when connected, is, O, creator of human order. You are the master of the country of disorder. You are the master of the order clock. Next was the routine observation of the 2 glowing stars. Through observation over the past few days, Hobert found that the middle-aged man in the first star lived in Backland, and the young man in the second star seemed to live in the South Continent, though the exact location was still unknown. The middle-aged man in the first star was still living in extravagance. Today, Hobert was lucky. Through a bill signed by the other party, he learned that his name was Lafite Pound. Exiting the star's perspective, Hobert felt this name was strangely familiar, but he couldn't recall where he had seen it. However, since he knew the other party's name, he could inquire about him in Backland when he had the chance. Then he went to observe the second star, only to see the young man pacing in the room with a painful expression, as if countless venomous snakes were drilling under the exposed skin of his face and hands. His state at this time looked very frightening. This is a sign of losing control. Hobert had felt he wasn't quite right yesterday, and he didn't expect him to lose control. Hobert, sitting on the Iron Throne, stroked his chin and thought. Although this young man was killing people when he first saw him, through observation over the past few days, Hobert found that this young man was not a serial killer or a heinous person, so he could try to save him. He pondered for a second or two and decided to try to use the power of order to help the other party stabilize his state. So Hobert used the Iron Throne to mobilize the power of order and put it into the second star. South Continent, West Baeland, upper reaches of the Hodis River. Mad roars echoed in Elliot's ears. The blood in his body churned, and his whole being felt like a balloon inflated to its limit, about to burst. His rationality was slowly leaving him. Elliot didn't know how much longer he could hold on. He was already somewhat despairing. The mad roars had tormented him for many years. Perhaps it was time to give up. Just as Elliot was about to send a warning to his companions to prevent himself from turning into a monster and causing unnecessary casualties in the village, a majestic and tall throne appeared above his head. A throne forged from iron swords, it looked powerful and mighty. A blurry black figure sat among what looked like thorny sharp swords, overseeing everything like a god, with an inexpressible solemnity and grandeur. Immediately after, Elliot felt the sense of losing control on his body disappear instantly. Every inch of his skin, every drop of his blood, seemed to become orderly as never before. After standing stunned for a few seconds, Elliot finally reacted. He quickly bowed and said, "Thank you, mysterious and great existence, for restoring order to my body. May I ask what kind of sacrifice I should make to repay you?" He dared not look up, only feeling the powerful pressure from the other party, and guessing in his heart which strange existence the other party was. It would be best if he could send the other party away through sacrifice. He was just afraid that the other party had some other purpose that would make his life worse than death. Elliot heard a majestic and solemn voice say, "I haven't observed the human world for a long time. Tell me about the things around you and the reason for your loss of control. Consider it your sacrifice. Haven't observed the human world for a long time. Is this a powerful being from the spirit world? Or a powerful being who fell into a deep sleep a long time ago? Elliot guessed as he respectfully said, as you command. I am located in General Anthony's territory in West Backland, south of Star Plateau, and west of the Pamiki Mountains. And the reason I lose control is because of a family curse. When each member of my family turns 12, a mad roar appears in our ears. This roar can stimulate our bloodline, making us half a sequence 9 of the lawyer pathway. The solemn voice interrupted him. You can only alleviate the symptoms of the roar by taking the lawyer potion, is that right? Elliot was stunned for a moment, then excitedly said, You know about this curse. Hobert on the Iron Throne thought, of course I know. You ask me why I know. Because the mysterious and great me also has this curse. Could this be a member of the Heller family? Hobert asked calmly, what is your family's name? Bach family. Elliot quickly said, mysterious and great existence, do you have a way to lift the curse on us? We will sacrifice everything you want. Not the Heller family. Or did they change their name and hide their identity? Haha, if there was a way to lift the curse, I would use it on myself first. Hobert continued, I am not interested in the sacrifices of mortals. He thought. K's, same style of showing off. Elliot quickly said, our family also has half human, half god powerhouses. If you can lift our family's curse, we will be loyal to you for generations. This is even a demigod family. It's quite remarkable that such a family with such a curse can still produce demigod powerhouses. Hobert suddenly thought that Christine and his biological father had fought in West Backland, so he asked, have you heard of a person named Rex Heller? Elliot's head bowed even lower. Omniscient mysterious existence, Rex is the benefactor of our clansmen. The Heller family, like us, also suffers from the same curse. The difference is that Rex was an unprecedented powerhouse. He had the best chance to end this curse, but it is said that he also failed. But Mr. Rex, during his lifetime, generously taught us a lot of knowledge about fighting the curse. For example, he told us 3 methods to alleviate the curse, and after our experiments, they are all very practical. He also told us how to fight the curse with extraordinary characteristics. With this method, our family has half human, half god powerhouses. Elliot's words gave Hobert a more concrete understanding of his biological father, whom the original owner had never met. Moreover, Rex's strength exceeded Hobert's previous expectations. He had initially thought Rex might just be a middle sequence beander, but after hearing Elliot's answer, Hobert realized Rex was at least a demigod. Elliot continued, according to some documents in the family, my ancestor once suspected that the family's curse came from a powerful sequence of prisoner who was skilled in curses and the language of filth. So, in recent decades, we have been hunting beanders of the prisoner sequence, searching for the source of the curse, but unfortunately, we have never obtained the information we wanted. Hobert was stunned. Before you encountered Rex, you didn't even have the protection of a demigod, yet you weren't retaliated against by a powerful sequence of prisoner. Elliot said, we have a high sequence sealed artifact that can form a chaotic barrier, protecting an area the size of a small town from being found by anyone. At this point, Elliot had no secrets from the powerful being above his head, revealing all the family's secrets. Of course, in his view, it made no difference whether he spoke or not, because the other party had already broken through the chaotic barrier and descended into the town, indicating that the other party was much stronger than that high-sequence sealed artifact. Hobert pondered for a moment and understood. Since it could form a chaotic barrier, it should be a sealed artifact of the lawyer sequence, which transformed the orderly state within a certain area into a distortion state. The country of disorder is a super sealed artifact of the lawyer sequence. What sealed artifact of this sequence could be higher in status than the country of disorder? So, Hobert, inside the country of disorder, completely ignored the sealed artifact protecting the Bach family. Having understood this, Hobert continued, although I have some interest in your family's curse, the allegiance of a sequence 4 is not enough for me to lift your curse. I will continue to watch you, but without my permission, you are not allowed to reveal my existence. Elliot was a little disappointed but still respectfully said, as you command. Hobert continued, if you show signs of losing control again, you can chant my name, but next time I help you, I will require a true sacrifice. Elliot became excited. As long as the process of losing control was stopped, it meant the family's curse was temporarily suppressed, which was also good news for the family. He almost knelt on the ground. I will listen to your honorable name. Hobert solemnly declared, O, creator of human order. You are the master of the kingdom of disorder. You are the master of the clock of order. Then he withdrew his power, and the image of the Iron Throne disappeared from above Elliot's head, but Elliot dared not look up for a long time. He didn't know whether it was out of excitement or fear, but he knelt on the ground, trembling all over. The Creator, Master, Master, this three-part honorable name has the status of a true God. Moreover, he is a creator, and the abilities he displayed all indicate that he is a high-sequence beander of the lawyer sequence. The elders in the family once said that only high-sequence beanders of the lawyer sequence had hope of lifting the curse. So, he really has the ability to lift the family's curse. Unfortunately, the family did not have a sacrifice that interested this powerful being. He really wanted to tell everyone this news. But he did not allow others to know of his existence. Elliot sighed, only able to strive to please him in the future so that he could pay more attention to his clansmen. Hobert, in the country of disorder, felt his spirituality was almost exhausted, so he quickly left the country of disorder. After returning to reality, Hobert had a splitting headache, and chaotic whispers appeared in his ears. He sighed. His spirituality was still too weak. His current limit was to stay in the country of disorder for half an hour, then rest for 5 or 6 hours to recover his spirituality. He estimated that after completely digesting the lawyer potion, he should be able to stay for an hour at a time. After resting for more than 10 minutes, the splitting headache and the irritating whispers gradually disappeared, and Hobert finally calmed down to think. Not just one family suffered from the mad roar curse, and the curses all produced sequence 9 of the lawyer sequence. This was definitely not a coincidence. Hobert also thought that the Bach family had a high sequence sealed artifact of the lawyer sequence. This family must have produced powerful beanders of the lawyer sequence, and it is very likely that this family is a beander family that controls the lawyer sequence. It's just the Bach family. He had never heard of them. Then he thought again, were the 2 stars emitting white light both people suffering from the mad roar curse? But in the first star, that middle-aged man named Lafite Pound was not tormented by the curse. While thinking, Hobert gradually fell asleep and slept until dawn. The next morning, Hobert, full of energy, rode a 2-wheeled carriage with Christine to the Mercenary Club on Queen's Avenue. The club was a very large courtyard. On Queen's Avenue, such a courtyard was inconspicuous, but for a club, having such facilities was already luxurious. When they arrived at the gate, Colonel Bruno's carriage was already waiting there. Christine greeted him from the car window, and the 2 carriages entered the gate together. At the gate, there were 7 or 8 security personnel in black clothes. They carefully checked Christine's badge and then conducted a routine inquiry of Hobert, who did not have a badge, before letting them in. The Mercenary Club required 2 official members to introduce a new member to join. Christine asked Colonel Bruno to come along precisely to complete the procedure of introducing Hobert. And the club membership fee was actually £80. This was very expensive for Hobert, but for professional mercenaries or military adults, this price was definitely worth it. However, Hobert's total savings at the moment were less than £80. Fortunately, Christine paid his membership fee and introduced him to the front desk receptionist. This is my eldest son, Hobert. He wants to find a place to practice shooting. Later, you can tell him about the club and show him the shooting range and the procedure for getting a gun. The receptionist immediately smiled and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Christine, we will definitely take good care of Mr. Hobert." Christine then said to Hobert, don't come back too late in the afternoon, lest your mother worry. Colonel Bruno and I have other matters, so I won't accompany you to practice shooting." Hobert nodded. "Okay, father. Thank you, Colonel Bruno, for the introduction." Colonel Bruno smiled and shook Hobert's hand, then left with Christine. At this point, the receptionist stepped forward and said, "Mr. Hobert, this way, please." There were 3 receptionists in total at the front desk, one of whom was guiding Hobert through the mercenary club, which did not affect the front desk's work. The receptionist attending to Hobert was a young woman in her 20s, dressed smartly and appropriately, appearing very talkative. She introduced herself, "You can call me Anneliese. Mr. Hobert, do you wish to practice with a pistol or a rifle?" Hobert replied, "Hello Anneliese, I wish to practice with a revolver." "All right, sir, the pistol range is in the backyard." Anneliese introduced, "You can first go to the weapons display room to select a gun and receive ammunition. Each member has a free quota of 500 rounds of ammunition per month. If you have a firearm permit, these bullets can also be taken out for use, but if you don't have a firearm permit, they can only be used at the shooting range. Additionally, the Mercenary Club will provide practice firearms to members, which can also only be used at the shooting range. If you wish to purchase a gun, you also need a firearm permit. The firearms here are more comprehensive than any other weapon shop, and the prices are more affordable." As she spoke, Anneliese led Hobert to the weapons display room, which was filled with a dazzling array of pistols, shotguns, rifles, and even high-pressure steam rifles. Anneliese introduced, "Aside from high-pressure steam rifles and new-style submachine guns, you can choose any other type of firearm here." Under Anneliese's guidance, Hobert finally saw the submachine gun. In his impression, he had never seen this style of submachine gun before. It had a bulky body and a circular magazine. The only familiar part to Hobert was that the magazine was inserted on top of the gun. Hobert asked, "Can I also purchase a machine gun?" If he carried this thing out and faced an opponent head-on, he would be unrivaled below Sequence 7. "I apologize, sir, you do not have the qualification to purchase it." Anneliese explained with a smile, "Only mercenary teams that have been part of the Mercenary Club for 3 years or more, or retired military officers, can purchase it. After purchase, it is also not allowed to be held or used within the city, and going forward, the firearm needs to be sent to the Mercenary Club for inspection every 3 months, and its usage over the past 3 months must be reported. Even if it's scrapped or the gun body suffers severe damage, the main parts must be brought back." Hobert understood, to prevent leaks. "Yes." Anneliese smiled. "The high-pressure steam rifles and submachine guns produced by the Ruined Kingdom are the most advanced firearms in the world. Even the army hasn't completed large-scale deployment yet." Hobert sighed. This mercenary club has a very strong backing. He still honestly chose a revolver. There were several types of revolvers here. One with a very long barrel looked very powerful, but the gun body was too heavy and inconvenient to carry. Those that were too small seemed to lack deterrence. Ultimately, Hobert chose a pistol with a barrel as long as an adult's palm and a gun body that looked quite industrially aesthetic. After choosing the gun, Hobert received 50 more rounds of ammunition and then left the weapons display room. Anneliese then introduced the locations of the restaurant and washroom, informed him of the lunch serving time, and only then did she take Hobert to the shooting range. On the way, Hobert asked, "I heard there are also gatherings or information exchange seminars here." "Yes," Anneliese said. "On the second room after turning left on the 3rd floor, there is an information wall where you can post free information. Anyone holding this mercenary club's badge can enter. For some valuable information, you can write a summary of the information, or a few keywords, and leave your contact information with the staff. If there is a buyer, we will immediately contact the information seller. Additionally, gatherings are once a week, in the first room after turning left on the 3rd floor, starting at 2:30 p.m. on Sunday. Anyone holding this mercenary club's badge can participate." Hobert nodded, thinking he could go check it out today. After exiting, the shooting range was right before his eyes. It looked like the backyard was originally a garden. Around the shooting range, there were many ornamental trees and flowers, but since there was no dedicated caretaker, these plants looked a bit listless. Hobert casually asked, "The mercenary club's premises seemed to be a residence before." "Yes." Anneliese, who was leading the way, said, "This used to be one of Viscount Pound's properties." Hobert was stunned. "Is it the Pound of Lafitte Pound?" he asked as if making small talk. "Pound? Why do I have no impression of this Viscount?" Anneliese casually replied, "It is said that because this lord became addicted to gambling and debauchery, Viscount Pound was demoted to a baronet more than 10 years ago." Hobert then asked, "How many family members are left in the Pound family now?" "I heard there's only one person left in the entire family." Anneliese shook her head. "I'm not very clear either." Hobert said, "Oh," and did not continue to ask. Upon arriving at the single shooting range, after Anneliese left, Hobert did not immediately practice shooting but instead pondered over the Pound family's affairs. Through Hobert's observations over the past week, Raft's usual demeanor was very much like that of a fallen noble, and it could basically be confirmed that Lafitte Pound should be a member of the Pound family. But the question is, why could Raft be seen in the stars before the Iron Throne? If Elliot Bach's star appeared before the Iron Throne not because of a curse, but because he was a member of an extraordinary family of the lawyer pathway, which is why his star was in the pool, then could the Pound family also be an extraordinary family of the lawyer pathway? Thinking of this, Hobert shook his head. He had too little information now and it was not good to investigate rashly, he could only observe for a while. He could, however, ask Miss Justice, who was also a noble, to help investigate the fallen nobles of Backland. After obtaining enough information, he could then use the Country of Disorder's authority to impress Raft, which might yield more information. Having made up his mind, Hobert decided to put this matter aside for now. Although having a believer of his own in Backland would be much more convenient, he couldn't take risks. Hobert began to concentrate on practicing shooting. After firing a few shots, he ejected the spent casings, loaded new bullets, and summarized, even with a revolver, the recoil when firing was very strong. Of course, it might also be because the gun he chose had more power than the pistols on the market. Then he began to try firing while in spirit vision, as he would need to fight while in spirit vision when facing enemies in the future. After firing 6 shots, Hobert found that his hit rate was much higher when in spirit vision. This should be the effect of extraordinary characteristics, not only providing a way to find opponents' weaknesses but also a bonus to the accuracy of attacking those weaknesses. The only regret was that his body was not yet accustomed to using a pistol, so his hit rate was only slightly higher, still a long way from hitting every shot. After firing more than 20 shots, Hobert's arm felt somewhat numb from the recoil. He rested for more than 10 minutes before firing all the remaining bullets. Next, Hobert planned to go look at the information wall. Hobert showed his badge to the guard at the door before being allowed to enter the information wall room. The room was large, almost as big as a living room at home. Except for one wall which was a window, the other 3 walls were blackboards. On the blackboards, there were pieces of information written in chalk. Several club members were standing with their hands behind their backs or their arms crossed, reading the information on the blackboards one by one. The information was beautifully written, likely by the staff sitting in the center of the room. In the very center of the room, there were several tables and chairs, as well as drinks like coffee and black tea, possibly for club members who were tired of reading to rest. One of the tables had a staff member sitting at it. On the table in front of him, there was a box of chalk and writing paper and pens. Hobert guessed that if one wanted to post any information, they would first write it down with a pen and hand it to the staff member, who would then transcribe it onto the blackboard. It was only then that Hobert realized, belatedly, that ever since he drank the potion, he had become exceptionally sensitive to rules and found it easier to summarize the rules of a certain area or event. Is this what a lawyer is? Good at summarizing rules? Hobert smiled and shook his head, then began to browse the information on the walls. After reading for a long time, he started to summarize the patterns again. The wall on the right side upon entering mainly displayed information about posting tasks or finding teammates. The middle wall mostly contained information about buying or selling certain items, and the wall on the left was for various exchange information. The tasks posted here included official and unofficial ones, tasks in the North Continent and also in the South Continent. For example, official tasks involved sabotaging and attacking the Forsake Empire's colonies in West Baeland to retaliate for the losses the Forsake Empire had inflicted on the ruined fleet at sea. There was also someone who discovered a vault in the South Continent where the Intis Republic stored looted gold, and they were looking for teammates here to carry out a heist. Information about selling and buying was the most numerous. Hobert found several beander items and several types of beander materials being sought and sold. There was even someone looking for common sequence 9 potion formulas. However, it wasn't explicitly stated that they were potion formulas. Since it was open to all members, words like extraordinary did not appear in the information. Instead, words like magical were used as substitutes, but those who understood. There were also people long-term selling common extraordinary materials like deep sleep flowers, dragon blood grass, and golden mint. This made Hobert's heart stir. Although a lawyer is not skilled in soul-related extraordinary abilities, as a sequence 9 beander, his spirit body and astral body are sufficient to support him in performing operations like spiritualism through rituals. For other beyonders, the biggest problem with operations like spiritualism is that they don't know how to perform the rituals. This knowledge is basically monopolized by churches and ancient secret organizations. Hobert's advantage was Old Neil's explanation, and Mr. Fool's demonstration, as a cult leader. This knowledge, which seemed unattainable to ordinary beyonders, was no secret to Hobert. The other few beander items successfully caught Hobert's attention, but their prices ranged from £300 to £3,000, which deterred the current Hobert. As for the exchange information, it was varied and diverse. Information about a cult organization appearing in South Wales County of the Ruined Kingdom, information about bizarre murder cases in military camps in East Balam, and even information about a certain Intis Republic senator having an affair. 2 pieces of information left a deep impression on Hobert. One was that not long ago, the Forsake Empire's fleet ambushed the ruined fleet on a route in the raging sea, resulting in the sinking of 1 ruined warship and 3 warships being damaged to varying degrees. The other piece of information was about General Anthony. Although he was ostensibly a warlord in West Baeland, he seemed to have the backing of the Forsake Empire behind the scenes. Hobert paid attention to the former piece of information because he didn't expect that there had already been small-scale military conflicts between the 2 countries. Perhaps this was a prelude by important figures like Adam and George III for the big war to come. He paid attention to the second piece of information because Hobert remembered that his first believer, Elliot Bach, was in the territory of the warlord General Anthony. Most of the other information was also about hidden news from the South Continent or other countries, such as the infiltration of various countries in East Balam, or the overt and covert struggles in West Baeland. For some people, these were very valuable pieces of information, but for the current Hobert, they were of little use. After organizing some potentially useful information, Hobert asked the staff member to leave a message, acquiring Emperor Rosal's notes, £5 per page. Note: I already have many of Emperor Rosal's notes, so I only acquire notes that are not in my collection. Since there is information about buying and selling extraordinary materials here, it indicates that the Mercenary Club is a club with beyonders, so acquiring things related to mysticism is also normal. As for the note at the end, it was because Hobert was a bit reluctant to spend money. After getting the notes, he would quickly scan them. If there was no important information, he would say that he already had that collection. Of course, acquiring Emperor Rosal's diary was a sure-win business. Hobert could first read the knowledge in the diary to increase his knowledge reserves, which was the first gain. Then he could take the diary to trade with his dear, Mr. Fool, to fleece Mr. Fool, which was the second gain. He could also use the knowledge from the diary to trade with justice and the hanged man, when appropriate, which was the third gain. Hobert grinned, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt this business was worthwhile. Finally, Hobert also asked the staff member to contact the club member selling extraordinary materials like deep sleep flowers and dragon blood grass, expressing his intention to purchase and hoping to complete a transaction at the club tomorrow afternoon or the day after tomorrow afternoon. He planned to purchase some common extraordinary materials and try out the rituals from his memory. After telling the staff member his communication address, Hobert, having gained a lot, unhurriedly went to the restaurant for lunch. In the restaurant, Hobert did not encounter Christine and Bruno, they might have already left the club. Lunch was a buffet, very rich, with beef, lamb chops, and seafood, and the taste was not bad. However, there didn't seem to be many people dining there. After eating and drinking his fill, Hobert took out his pocket watch and checked it. It was not yet 1 o'clock. He then went to the sofa in the lobby, reading the newspaper while waiting for the gathering to begin. After reading the newspaper for a while, Hobert noticed that many people, either leisurely or quickly, entered the basement, and they didn't return even after more than 10 minutes. Moreover, Hobert clearly heard someone discussing how this gathering was going. He was a bit puzzled. Had the gathering location been changed to the basement? Good news. Starting tomorrow, it will be on recommendation, so there will be extra updates from tomorrow until next week. Being on recommendation for the first time is crucial for a book. If you still have votes, please cast them for the author. Recommendation votes and monthly votes are both fine. The author is not picky, degree. In an era where information did not spread very quickly, the gatherings initiated by the club were an important channel for an industry or a class to acquire information. Although Hobert had never been a soldier and had no intention of joining the military in ruin, he still very much wanted to know some first-hand information about the North Continent and the South Continent. Additionally, judging from the information on the information wall, this gathering would likely involve the transaction of extraordinary materials and extraordinary items, and the transactions at the mercenary club, which had a military background, would surely include many extraordinary items suitable for combat. For Hobert, this would be an important channel to integrate into the extraordinary world. Therefore, Hobert attached great importance to this gathering, but why were so many people going to the basement for the gathering instead of the third floor? He checked his pocket watch. It was exactly 1:20 p.m., still more than an hour until the gathering time Annalise had told him. After a brief thought, Hobert had an epiphany. He put down the newspaper and also went to the entrance of the basement, but he was stopped by a waiter. The waiter was tall and looked shrewd, more like a bodyguard. The waiter said, "Sorry, sir, this area is only open to certain members." Hobert became even more certain of his guess. There was also a gathering in the basement, but it was a beander gathering, while the gathering on the third floor was for ordinary mercenaries. This made sense. Otherwise, if there were a large number of ordinary people at the gathering, extraordinary transactions would become like illegal transactions, needing to be carried out stealthily. Hobert asked, "What kind of channel do I need to go through to participate?" The waiter said, "Prove yourself." "How do I prove it?" The waiter spread his hands, offering no answer. Hobert immediately understood. He activated his spirit vision and examined the waiter in front of him. The waiter's left shoulder was slightly lower than his right, and his left arm was intentionally or unintentionally protecting his left armpit. Hobert concluded, "If I attack your left armpit, it will be easier to take you down." The waiter was slightly stunned. "You're right, my left armpit was injured on the battlefield. You have proven your ability, please come in." Hobert smiled and nodded, descending the stairs step by step. The basement was larger than he had imagined, like a small theater, with a stage on one side and rows of seats on the other. Considering the history of this building, it was possible that it had indeed been a small theater. Many people were already seated, and unlike other beander gatherings, most of the participants at this gathering knew each other, so there was no need to wear masks or hoods to conceal their faces. They simply sat in groups of 3 or 5, chatting while waiting for the gathering to begin. Hobert found a corner to sit down. As it was his first time attending such a gathering, he only planned to be an observer, as he had nothing to sell and not enough money to buy anything. At 1:30 p.m., an old man wearing a tuxedo and a cloak, with a golden mask and gray hair, emerged from the back door of the stage. Hobert noticed that the old man's shoes had very long pointed toes, and his clothes were clearly out of sync with the times, as if he had stepped out of an ancient, oil painting. However, the majesty emanating from him made people dare not look directly at him for long, and they would even unconsciously lower their heads in his presence. Hobert immediately made a judgment. This was a powerful expert from the judge pathway. The old man's appearance immediately silenced everyone's discussions. Let's begin. The old man, who had taken a seat in the center of the stage, seemed to command. The gathering officially began. A middle-aged man with a small mustache in the front row was the first to stand up and say, "My mercenary squad has just accepted a mission to retaliate against the Forsake Empire. We are currently missing a teammate skilled in spiritualism, requiring them to be sequence 8 or above, with combat experience with the warrior or hunter pathways." Someone asked, "Where do you plan to retaliate against those bastards?" "I cannot disclose the specific location," the middle-aged man recruiting said. "I can only tell you it's on the South Continent. Not at sea." The middle-aged man did not reply, but everyone understood that the ruined kingdom did not intend to retaliate against the Forsake Empire at sea. Many people immediately signed up. The middle-aged man invited all applicants to meet on the second floor after the gathering. Then, a young man stood up and said, "About half a month ago, on the west bank of the Tassoc River in northern Backland, an extraordinary event occurred where a small forest disappeared and reappeared. I believe this news is still fresh in everyone's minds. Last week, I led a team to conduct an on-site investigation and confirmed that it is a Trensused family ruin from the 4th epoch. We speculate that there should be extraordinary items or extraordinary characteristics within the ruin. For unknown reasons, they have become active recently. We now need to recruit a teammate from the corpse collector pathway to deal with potential evil spirits inside. And another teammate from the lawyer pathway to deal with the side effects of extraordinary items and summarize their usage rules." Hobert was somewhat tempted. The Trensused family was an extraordinary family that controlled the Black Emperor pathway. Regardless of whether there were extraordinary items or extraordinary characteristics in the ruin, they were very likely items from the Black Emperor pathway. That's why the other party would recruit a teammate from the lawyer pathway, which is the Black Emperor pathway. Having a teammate from this pathway would make it easier to summarize the side effects and usage rules of extraordinary items. Hobert really wanted to participate, but his strength was still too weak, and participating in such an operation would be very dangerous, so he had to give up this opportunity. Afterward, there were also groups formed to investigate cult organizations in South Wales County, or to explore the South Continent. Hobert was not interested in these and did not delve deeper into them. After the recruitment process ended, everyone began the trading session. They would stand up and speak, stating what they wanted to sell or what they were looking to buy. As Hobert expected, most of the items traded were extraordinary items that could be used in combat, but the prices were steep, and he simply couldn't afford them at the moment. Some people also sold extraordinary characteristics, primarily concentrated in the warrior, corpse collector, prisoner, and hunter pathways. These 4 pathways were the main beander opponents in the ruined kingdom at present. The warrior and hunter pathways mostly came from their old adversary, the Forsake Empire, while the corpse collector and prisoner pathways mostly came from local beanders on the South Continent. The gathering finally ended around 3 p.m. Although the old man sitting on the stage only said, "Let's begin," and "That's all for today," as long as he was there, everyone felt very confident about the transactions conducted here, and the mercenary teams also had a basic trust in each other. As the crowd left the basement, Hobert secretly made up his mind, he still needed to work hard to earn money. So, after Hobert returned home, he went back to studying the 3 cases Barton had given him. For now, only his work as a lawyer could provide him with income. Christine had not returned by dinner time. He occasionally went out for social engagements, and everyone was used to it. After dinner, Hobert observed Raft as usual, and as always, he appeared at the gambling table, spending sweat and money on gambling. Tomorrow, I will ask Miss Justice to help investigate. It won't be too late to take the next step after confirming that Raft is indeed a gambler. After leaving the country of disorder, Hobert pondered Raft's matter, the 3 cases he had on hand, and tomorrow's Tarot Club meeting, gradually drifting off to sleep. South Continent, upstream of the Hodis River, no existence town. Because to people outside the town, this town does not exist, so the town's name is No Existence Town. Low sequence Beanders gathered as usual, and their status was checked by middle sequence clansmen. In this cursed family, most Beanders died from losing control and suicide. Very few truly died at the hands of enemies, which is why there is a weekly custom of checking the Beanders' status. Because the vast majority died within the town, the Beander characteristics of this family have not been significantly lost for hundreds of years. On the contrary, through combat, they have accumulated a large number of Beander characteristics from other paths. If not for the curse, they could have at least established a corpse collector path from sequence 9 to sequence 6, and a prisoner path from sequence 9 to sequence 5. Elliot, a sequence 8 Beander, was also among the low sequence ranks, and he was a key subject for examination because he had shown signs of losing control during the routine check a week ago and was prohibited from leaving the town. Calvin, a middle sequence powerhouse responsible for the check and Elliot's uncle, could hardly believe his eyes. Elliot, your signs of losing control have all disappeared. Moreover, his entire body was in perfect order, a stark contrast to his previous incoordination. Everyone looked over. In No Existence Town, losing control is generally irreversible. Once signs of losing control appear, close attention must be paid, as complete loss of control is only a matter of time. Elliot inwardly praised the mysterious existence on the Iron Throne again. He had already prepared an excuse. Thanks to the Rex Law, the Bach family refers to the method of resisting the curse taught by Rex as the Rex Law. I never expected those methods to play a crucial role at a critical moment. Everyone either nodded or looked puzzled, but the routine check continued, and they no longer paid attention to Elliot. Calvin, however, shook his head. The Rex Law would have an effect, but not such a significant one. If he hadn't noticed that the curse on Elliot was still present, he would have immediately reported it to the elders. Uncle Calvin, can I continue to go outside the town for missions? Elliot asked. Calvin then came back to his senses. Yes, you have no more problems. You can freely enter and exit the town. In any case, the disappearance of Elliot's signs of losing control was a good thing. As the carriage arrived on the street of the law firm, Hobert saw Mr. Robin standing at the entrance of the firm. This was Mr. Robin, the defendant in the first case Hobert took on, whose house was auctioned by the court last week to repay his debts. White Myrtle Street, where the law firm is located, is a street with a concentration of various firms, service companies, and other service industries. These small businesses make their signs and company carriages look bright and splendid to attract the attention of potential customers and showcase their company's financial resources and capabilities. People who come here seeking services are also well-dressed backland high society figures and middle-class individuals who value respectability. Splendid carriages and well-dressed pedestrians came and went incessantly, but Mr. Robin was an exception. He was still wearing his tattered coat and patched hat, looking out of place on this street. Hobert stepped down from the carriage. Mr. Robin. Mr. Robin nervously took off his hat. Mr. Hobert, I hope to get your help. Please follow me. Hobert led Mr. Robin into the firm, wanting to hear what difficulties he had encountered. Hobert shared an office with 5 other lawyer assistants. He arrived the earliest, and there was no one else in the office yet. Hobert invited Mr. Robin to sit by his desk and poured him a glass of water, what legal difficulties have you encountered? Mr. Robin tightly clutched his hat. I don't know if this counts as a legal difficulty, sir. Tell me about it. My investment actually can't be considered a failure, I was scammed. Mr. Robin recounted. 6 months ago, my cousin approached me, saying that Mr. Zachary, who runs an insurance company, was facing financial difficulties. Mr. Zachary was willing to sell a portion of his shares to overcome the difficulties and was looking for investors everywhere. My cousin obtained a share authorization letter for 0.8% of the shares, but it required £1,600. He couldn't come up with that much money by himself, so he came to me to partner in buying it. We each put in £800, and the profits would be split equally. Sir, for us, this was a great investment opportunity. If we completed the transaction, I would receive around £200 in dividends each year, which was almost as much as my salary. I went around inquiring about Mr. Zachary's insurance company, and the answer I got was that this insurance company was doing very well. So, my cousin and I pooled £1,600 and completed the equity transaction. At this point, Mr. Robin's expression turned bitter. It wasn't until more than a month later that we found out that the insurance company had never sold shares at all, and there was no one named Zachary in their insurance company. Hobert asked, "Didn't you report it to the police? Is the share authorization letter still with you?" We only learned after reporting it to the police that Zachary was the boss of a gang in the East District, and he had already disappeared half a month before we reported it. Mr. Robin said, "It was also through the police that we learned that many people were scammed just like us. The share authorization letter is still with me, but it has been proven to be forged." As he spoke, he took out a share authorization letter. Hobert's first reaction was, "Is a fraudster performing a role play?" He thought for a moment before reluctantly saying, "I'm sorry, Mr. Robin, I am not a police officer, and I cannot help you find a fugitive." No, Mr. Robin said. "I'm not asking you to help find someone, but my cousin and I have been searching for and investigating Zachary, and we inadvertently learned that Zachary was actually working for a Mr. Heyman. We don't know how to find evidence to accuse Heyman, so we came to ask for your help." He continued, "If you can help us recover that money, we are willing to use 20% of it as your lawyer's fee." Under Mr. Robin's eager gaze, Hobert said, "I cannot immediately agree to this now. I need to investigate first. Please leave me an address. If my investigation makes progress, I will write to you." He said, "Please tell me in detail about your investigation process again." "Thank you for your help," Mr. Robin said with red eyes. They had already approached many lawyers, but no one was willing to help them. Hobert was the only lawyer willing to understand the details. Hobert asked about Mr. Heyman's residence. Mr. Robin said, "We only know this gentleman's name, but we don't know any other information about him." Hobert felt a bit helpless and had to investigate himself. He left the share authorization letter. As soon as he saw Mr. Robin off, Barton called out to him, "Are you going to help?" "Yes," Hobert said, "at least I will investigate." Barton shook his head. "We are lawyers, not police, nor detectives. We need the client to provide sufficient evidence. Our role is only to help the client with lawsuits, not to find evidence." Hobert smiled wryly. "I know you are right, but I still want to help him. Even if I find out after investigation that I can't help him, my conscience will feel better." Barton spread his hands. "All right then, but the firm will not reimburse you for your expenses on this case. Of course, if there is any profit, you don't have to turn it over to the firm, just consider it a private commission you received." Hobert nodded. "Okay." Hobert spent the entire morning processing his gun license. After returning from the government office, he organized documents and consulted files. He planned to go out in the afternoon under the guise of visiting a client, then find a hotel and rent an hourly room to attend the tarot club. Fortunately, he didn't go out. Near noon, he received a letter from the mercenary club stating that the person selling common extraordinary materials like dragon blood grass had scheduled a trade with him at the club at 4 p.m. Additionally, Someone wanted to sell Emperor Rosel's notes and had also scheduled a trade with him at around 4 p.m. It seemed he wouldn't have time to visit clients on Monday. Around 2 p.m., Hobert left the firm, walked through 2 streets, then found a hotel and spent 1 soul to rent an hourly room. As soon as 3 p.m. arrived, Hobert, who was already prepared, was pulled to the gray fog above. After the members of the gathering greeted each other, Hobert sincerely thanked them. "Thank you, the fool, for the idea you provided at the last gathering. After my confirmation, my family does indeed have a maddening curse, and I am currently investigating the source of the curse. If anyone hears of a similar curse, please remember to tell me. I will reward the information with extraordinary knowledge." The hanged man agreed, while Miss Justice seemed a bit restless. "Respected the fool, Mr. Hanged Man who always helps me, and the knowledgeable Emperor, I have a question I'd like to ask. What can a pet with beander powers do to help its owner?" As soon as she finished speaking, she noticed the fool, the hanged man, and the Emperor all fell silent simultaneously. "Audrey! Hey, speak up. Don't look at me like that. Really, I'm asking for my friend." Hobert's light chuckle broke the silence. "If that pet possesses the extraordinary ability of a spectator, it can observe and overhear for you in certain situations. People will be wary of their own kind, but they are unlikely to suspect a pet of eavesdropping." "Audrey, that makes sense. Many times when Dad discusses important matters with others, he avoids me, but they don't drive Susie away." "Wait a minute, Emperor, why did you directly use spectator as an example?" She quickly jumped to the next topic to alleviate her embarrassment. "The fool, I have found another page of Emperor Rosel's diary." After about 4 or 5 minutes, the fool finished reading the diary. "You can communicate now." Audrey breathed a sigh of relief. "I want to know if there is a potion named Arbitrator, and also what kind of beander can directly pass through wooden doors." "Yes, there is," Hobert said casually. "Beanders of the Arbitrator pathway are very common in the armies of the Ruined Kingdom and the Feniport Kingdom, because the royal families of these 2 kingdoms, the Augustus family and the Castile family, became beander families of the Arbitrator pathway by pledging allegiance to the Solomon Empire and the Terenzost Empire. Additionally, due to war and other reasons, the kings of these 2 kingdoms have granted some soldiers Arbitrator pathway potions as rewards, leading to the emergence of some Arbitrator beander families who are not of royal descent. Basically, Arbitrator is widely present among the nobility, military, and political circles of the 2 kingdoms. The Forsake Empire should also have some Arbitrator beander characteristics. After all, it is an old rival of the Ruined Kingdom." Audrey was a bit surprised, not expecting the royal family to be a beander family, but thinking about it, in a world where beanders exist, the fact that the Augustus family could exist for 1,000 years and remain standing itself explained many issues. Hobert continued, "As for beanders who can pass through wooden doors, those are beanders of the apprentice pathway. The Gnostic Society has many beanders of this pathway. Additionally, the Abraham family also possesses a relatively complete potion formula for this pathway. However, like my family, the Abraham family is also deeply affected by a curse. It is said that there are currently no strong individuals of that pathway left." Alger and Klein were both slightly surprised. They both knew about the apprentice beander pathway and the Gnostic Society, but they had never heard of the Abraham family, which made them once again marvel at the Emperor's vast knowledge. Then they became very curious about the history and current situation of the Abraham family. "Emperor," Audrey asked, "why have I not heard of the Abraham family?" Klein secretly thought in his heart, "Miss Justice, your question is simply brilliant." Alger also pricked up his ears, very earnestly, freeloading these secret knowledge of the extraordinary world. Hobert smiled. "That's because this family began to decline in the 4th epoch, but now, apart from the beanders of the Gnostic Society, almost all other beanders of the apprentice pathway have intricate connections with this family." Audrey nodded. "Emperor, your answer is very detailed. How should I pay you for the information?" Hobert had already planned to ask Audrey to investigate the declining nobles of Backland, and this investigation would naturally include Lafitte Pound. However, just as the words reached his lips, Hobert suddenly felt this scene was very familiar. He racked his brain and finally remembered. In the Tarot Club a few months later, Mr. World would commission Audrey to do the same investigation. At the same time, all memories concerning Raft also surfaced in Hobert's mind. The Pound family was a descendant of Blood Emperor Tudor. After changing their surname and concealing their identities, they began to pledge allegiance to the Rune royal family, but their true purpose was to settle in Backland and attempt to excavate the ruins left by the Tudor Empire. As a result, a large number of powerful individuals in the family were killed by the evil spirits in the ruins, and since then, the Pound family has never recovered. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.